Chapter 435. In the depths of Mount Lu, everyone was deathly silent. This was actually the result. This was a person who had been nurtured according to the ancient heavenly knight training method. He had experienced the baptism of blood and fire, climbed out from piles of corpses, and possessed rich combat experience. Yet in the end, he had been decapitated with a single slash and his head rolled far away. The 100 transformations, Saint Child's silk-like, long hair moved without any wind. The smile on his gentle face was still there, but there was now a certain coldness to it. Moreover, his pupils were emitting a lustrous beam of light. He was somewhat angry. First, it was the two domain researchers, and now it was the cavalry he had personally nurtured. Both of them had actually died one after the other. Moreover, that native had dared to challenge him to his face. This made him lose all face. Bai Qing was dressed in plain clothes, and the expression on her elegant face was frozen. This result caught her unprepared. It was simply too sudden. An invincible cavalry had been killed just like that. Her silver hair reached her waist, her figure was tall, and her temperament was excellent. But now, her fair face was suffused with a green aura, and her expression was extremely ugly. She felt that this was intolerable. She had lost all face and was completely unable to step down. That native was equivalent to giving them a slap in the face. On the mountain peak, the silver waterfall poured down and splashed large amounts of water. Clouds and mist enshrouded the place, blooming with multicolored light, and the sound of waves could be heard as the green pines and cypresses swayed. Everyone was silent. No one spoke. At this time, the most uncomfortable were naturally the 5 knights confronting Chu Feng. It was too late for regrets. They should have attacked just now. At that time, they were as unmoving as a mountain, confident in their extraordinary abilities. When their comrade attacked, the 5 of them had expressions of admiration on their faces and were prepared to see Chu Feng be killed. That was because the difference in strength between the two parties wasn't small. They weren't even on the same evolutionary level. However, the result was decided in an instant. Their comrade had been killed in such a humiliating manner. He had been captured alive by Chu Feng, and with a swing of his sword, his head had been chopped off cleanly. This was like a slap to their faces. Kill! An armored knight leapt up. His face was covered in a beard, and his eyes were fierce. His entire body erupted with azure light like a goshawk soaring into the sky. He held a large azure gold sword that was as tall as his body, and energy surged down like a tidal wave. Near this thick and heavy sword body, green gas was rolling like a mountain torrent bursting through a dam. He hacked at Chu Feng with an indomitable momentum. This was a knight with 12 severed shackles. He had killed countless people in the past and possessed an extremely strong, baleful aura. At the same time, the other 4 horsemen also moved. They each wielded halberds, dagger axes, and other weapons as they greeted Chu Feng's body. They couldn't wait to destroy him. They didn't want to make the same mistake a second time. Since their companions were attacking, they naturally cooperated with all their might and followed up to kill the enemy. However, this time, Chu Feng's defensive power was even more astonishing, simply dumbfounding. A set of silver armor appeared on his body, which was given to him by Yang Shan. It had belonged to Yang family's heir, Yang Xian. It shone with silver light and flowed with a mysterious force, protecting Chu Feng's entire body. At the same time, that monastic robe floated up like a scarlet sea, surging with great momentum. It rose and fell here, facing the 4 knights who took action from behind. The 4 people's dagger axes, halberds, and other weapons fell on the monastic robe as if they had sunk into a swamp. At the same time, the silver armor was also glowing and clanging. These 2 secret treasures were too extraordinary. Additionally, a small shield had long since flown out from Chu Feng's body, emitting a resplendent radiance. This was a gift from Huruoxian. It collided with the knight who had leapt high into the air and was hacking at him with a great sword in both hands. Sparks flew in all directions. The shiny shield enlarged and directly blocked the golden greatsword, which was as tall as a man, and even sent it flying high into the air. These secret treasures weren't simple at all. They belonged to saint children and goddesses, so naturally, they were extraordinary. Now they were being displayed. Buzz! Chu Feng brandished the bronze sword in his hand and slashed at the knight who had leapt high into the air. The opponent's greatsword was repelled by the shield and was left wide open. He simply couldn't defend against it. Puffed! Blood splashed out. Chu Feng's sword swept horizontally and suddenly cut the falling knight in half at the waist. The upper and lower halves of his body separated and fell to the ground with a plop. Ah! The knight still hadn't died when he fell to the ground. His vitality was tenacious as he rolled all over the ground and howled in pain. Even an iron-blooded knight couldn't endure this kind of torture. The void rumbled and the monastic robe trembled. Scarlet multicolored light shot out in tens of thousands of streaks as it repelled the four people's heavy weapons. It was truly too extraordinary. Even though there were two people who secretly used secret techniques to avoid the monastic robe, they released lightning and spat out sword radiance to attack Chu Feng's true body. They were all disintegrated by the silver armor on his body. This time, the result was still decided in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Chu Feng had cut the body of the second knight in half. Both sides quickly moved to the side and created some distance between them. At this time, the scarlet and sparkling monastic robe fluttered down and landed on Chu Feng's silver-armored body. He put his hands together and said, "Immeasurable deity." This Dao name was too ear-piercing and left everyone dumbstruck. The scene was truly bizarre. Chu Feng, clad in the secret treasure of the Buddhist race, had cut down two knights in succession with a single slash, stunning everyone else. Even the remaining four people didn't continue to attack. Instead, they picked up their companion who had been cut in half at the waist and wanted to help him reconstruct his body. Blue veins popped up on their faces, and they were all extremely resentful. In the rear, the 100 Transformations Saint Child Yuan Feng snorted lightly with a gloomy expression. Chu Feng had once again counterattacked and humiliated him in front of everyone. Rebel! The Swan Fairy by Qing's expression was unsightly. This situation was truly unexpected and made her cheeks burn. It was very uncomfortable. In the distance, the people on the other two star passages were all staring at the battlefield with glowing eyes. This was really happening one after another. The first time could be considered a fluke, but what about now? Chu Feng had cut down another knight. The young divine son, Ji Ling, who was playing chess on a pine tree, threw down his chess piece and looked at the area. The old man also revealed an odd expression as he examined Chu Feng. Princess Lin's bright red lips opened slightly, and her face revealed an astonished expression. She was truly astonished. Chu Feng was actually so powerful that he had killed two iron-blooded knights in succession. This was different for what she had expected. Not only did Chu Feng not collapse, but he was also very calm. He had first killed the domain researcher and then the knight. He had never been defeated. According to her calculations, Chu Feng simply couldn't resist. He would either be captured and humiliated or crippled by the Saint Child's troops. Could it be that he can go one step further? I don't believe it. He shouldn't have the qualifications to compete with Saint Child-level characters. They aren't even on the same level. The difference is too great, she muttered to herself. On the other star passage, the demonic race Saintess, Ji Xian, smiled radiantly. She sat behind the jade table on the green grass and sipped from her jade cup in a leisurely and contented manner. Her origins were great. She was the descendant of a demonic saint. Interesting. Although he's a native of a savage planet, he's still a heaven's chosen. I'm somewhat looking forward to it now. Ji Xian held the jade cup in her hand. The dark green wine complemented her red lips as she smiled radiantly. The Peacock King and the Nine Lives Cat's expressions changed slightly. As they saw it, Chu Feng had indeed exceeded their expectations. He had even attracted the interest of a demonic saint's direct descendant. Even further away, the lion-headed Huang Tong felt his hair stand on end. He shrunk his neck and whispered to himself, "Chu Feng, you should go on your way as soon as possible. I'll definitely hold a memorial ceremony for you next year on this day. Don't waste any more time. This is a bit scary. The large group of people following him and Chu Feng had complicated expressions on their faces. They were deeply shocked. At this time, Chu Feng was clad in a monastic robe. His appearance was solemn and dignified, just like an enlightened expert. He stared at the 100 transformations, Saint Child Yuan Feng in the folded space, and said, "Evil creature, come and accept your death." Apart from the 100 transformations, Saint Child's lineage, everyone else was petrified. This fellow looked like a swindler. He really did think he was an enlightened monk. Wrong. Looking at his appearance, he considered himself a Taoist. It was truly a scene of chaos. Everyone's eyeballs were about to pop out. Originally, this place was austere and the atmosphere was tense. However, his taunting of Yuan Feng immediately diluted the terrifying atmosphere. "Rebel, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You're courting death." Bai Qing rebuked tenderly in order to protect the saint child's dignity. Chu Feng, clad in a monastic robe, said arrogantly, "It's not that I want to criticize you guys, but you're all a bunch of trash. What saint child? What heavenly knight? None of you are enough for me to chop." Yuan Feng's gaze was cold and deep. His heart was filled with killing intent. He really wanted to kill this rebel immediately for touching his bottom line again and again. Behind him, in the depths of the folded space, a group of armored horsemen were silent and disciplined. They were as motionless as statues, but their gazes were somewhat frightening. Each and every one of them revealed a faint cold glint. Chu Feng's words truly stung their hearts. He actually dared to ridicule them and ruthlessly trample on the heavenly knight's honor. "Kill!" At this time, the 4 horsemen put down their companion who had been cut in half at the waist. They couldn't bear it any longer. Without needing Yuan Feng and Bai Qing's orders, they each erupted with their strongest trump cards and charged toward Chu Feng. 3 of them had mounts and were exceptionally powerful. A great battle had broken out. This was a matter of dignity. Relatively speaking, they had long since stopped caring about their lives. This was the first requirement of a heavenly knight's growth, to be emotionless and unafraid of death. Chu Feng didn't dare to be careless. Even he had to be on high alert in the face of these armored horsemen. He was afraid that he would capsize if he wasn't careful. After all, in terms of evolution level, he was indeed 2 or 3 small realms lower than the other party. These people were already existences at the peak of the shackled realm and had no way of advancing. Boom! The 4 experts and their mounts attacked together in a barbaric charge accompanied by torrential killing intent. This place was surging with blood energy. People were shouting, horses neighing, and energy was boiling. The mountain forest exploded, the rocks melted, and red magma surged forth. Chu Feng was carefully inspecting the secret treasures on his body and was pleasantly surprised. As expected of the items carried by a saintess, they were all extraordinary and not a single one was ordinary. Among them, the bronze sword was neither hot nor hot and seemed to be the most ordinary. The monastic robe, on the other hand, was the most mysterious. Its defensive power was number 1 and was even more powerful than the silver armor. What shocked Chu Feng the most was that the golden threads on the red monastic robe actually contained traces of divine magnetism. One had to know that this was a material used to arrange heaven-shaking domains. He probed further and soon found out that this monastic robe wasn't simple at all. It contained a domain within. In just a split second, scarlet light surged from Chu Feng's body and greatly increased his might. He didn't even need to arrange his own domain. He only activated the monastic robe and used his knowledge of domains to control it. This was already an extraordinary display. At this moment, the monastic robe wrapped around him and darted left and right. Every attack was like an avalanche with torrential energy beams. It was truly intimidating. In the end, a single attack blasted apart a man and a mount. Meanwhile, he himself was protected by the monastic robe. His clothes weren't stained with blood and were pure and untainted. In the eyes of the remaining 3 horsemen, Chu Feng was like a demon at this moment. He possessed a demonic nature and was incomparably ferocious with a red glow covering his body. Following which, Chu Feng drew upon terrifying energy and slashed out with his sword, cutting off the shoulder of one of the horsemen. Even his mount was cut in half at the waist and met its end on the spot. This was a massacre. After discovering the secret of the monastic robe, Chu Feng was like a ferocious tiger released from its cage. He was tyrannical and unstoppable. With a ripping sound, he slashed out with his sword. Sword radiance surged as he decapitated yet another horseman. Fresh blood sprayed high into the air. Only the last person remained. He roared as his armor lit up. He brandished the heavenly dagger axe in his hand and brandished it at Chu Feng. But it was futile. The monastic robe flickered with light as Chu Feng moved away as though he were using the lightning escape. After a series of entanglements, he slashed out with his sword. The last person was cleaved into two by Chu Feng along with his mount. At this point, all 6 horsemen had been annihilated. Even the one who had been cut in half at the waist had been beheaded by Chu Feng in the battle just now. Anymore, Chu Feng stood alone on the battlefield with the bronze sword in hand and asked loudly. The scene was completely silent. Chapter 436. The Swan Fairy by Qing, dressed in plain snow-white clothes, couldn't help but want to curse. This was truly intolerable. This person should be struck by lightning for being too shameful and repulsive. As for the main character, the 100 Transformations Saint Child, Yuan Feng, his expression could no longer be gentle. It was rather unsightly and somewhat ashen. He had been provoked again and again. In the end, he even heard this native speak such words. This was unbearable. The group of knights behind him was originally as still as a mountain with iron discipline, but now they were restless. Some of them growled in a low voice, wishing they could kill their way out of the folded space. At this time, even the people on the other star passages were speechless. Wasn't it just killing 6 knights? He dared to say that he was lonely like snow. He should really be struck by lightning. I've already said that my evolutionary abilities are stronger than domains. This is the domain I'm most proficient in. I've always been peerless in a real battle. Chu Feng boasted shamelessly. Everyone, yin #%. An entity with 9 severed shackles had the nerve to say that his evolutionary abilities were extraordinary. A large group of people wanted to curse. Didn't he rely on secret treasures to defeat his opponents? How dare he be so lonely? What, you don't like it? Chu Feng wore a monastic robe and held a bronze sword in his hand. He pointed at the depths of the folded space and glanced sideways at Wind Feathers and by Qing as he said, "Bring it on." This was a blatant provocation, a public challenge. Not to mention the people involved, even the people in the distance were petrified. With such a high profile, was he not afraid of lightning falling from the sky? Needless to say, Yuan Feng's psychological shadow was boundless. If he could cross over, he would definitely go to war and massacre the rebel natives. It was truly intolerable. At this moment, Yuan Feng couldn't help but roar out. But Chu Feng didn't seem to be aware of it. He puffed out his chest and held his head high, saying, "I'm here. Who dares to fight me? Traitor, you have provoked me again and again. You will definitely die a horrible death." Bai Qing said furiously. She was truly angered. "I will kill you," Yuan Feng said in a deep voice. His eyes were sinister, and his former gentleness could no longer be seen. He really wanted to slap that person to death with one palm. "What's the point of talking? Come and fight. I'll fight all of you alone." Chu Feng pointed the bronze sword at Wind Feathers and Bai Qing, and then at the group of knights in the depths of the folded space. Yuan Feng's subordinates were extremely angry. That native was too arrogant, and it made them want to flip out. They wished they could immediately rush over and beat him to death. "You're just saying what you can do, but what do you actually mean? What kind of bullsh *T saint is this? I'll kill him with one slash of my sword." Chu Feng looked like he was pointing his sword at the world. In the distance, the others were silent. Even Ji Ling, the Divine Sun level character from the other star passage, was in a daze and had long since stopped playing chess. As for the old man sitting across the chessboard, he was also speechless as he stared at Chu Feng. Princess Lin was flabbergasted and didn't know what to say. The saintess of the demon race, Ji Xian, rubbed her forehead and said, "I really underestimated him. His skin is thicker than I thought. Relying on the secret treasure in your hand, you still dare to be insolent and arrogant. What lonely snow! Today, I will beat you until your entire body is covered in blood." Just at this moment, a cold voice resounded. Not far away, a knight on a green-furred lion was approaching from the mountain ridge. That green-furred lion emitted a baleful aura and overflowed with blood energy, forming astonishing energy waves. Meanwhile, the knight was clad in black armor and looked intimidating and somewhat apprehensive. "Don't let him go." Yu Wenfeng's deep voice came from within the folded space. He was truly furious. "Yes," the person on the green-furred lion responded. No one had expected that there would be more than one follower of the 100 Transformations Saint Child outside. Another knight appeared. He was over 3 meters tall and carried a large halberd without a mount. His jet-black armor was cold and indistinct, and his entire person was like an iron tower. His voice was like a clap of thunder, causing everyone's ears to ring. He said, "I guarantee that I'll kill him." He had walked out from the folded space. Apparently, he had already crossed over successfully, but he had been lying low all this time and was being used as an ambush. Once he crossed over successfully, he could freely enter and exit the folded space. This was the last person the 100 Transformations Saint Child could use. At present, there were only 2 knights left who could move. They were obviously not ordinary. The battle intent they emitted was astonishingly high, and they were incomparably conceited. 2 carefree realm knights. Someone was incomparably shocked and alarmed. How could beings of this level come out? It shouldn't be possible at this stage. Carefree realm evolvers crippled themselves and regressed to the shackled realm. Only then did they cross over, said the old man who was playing chess with the divine son Ji Ling under the pine tree. Some people drew in a breath of cold air after hearing this. This was indeed ruthless. He would rather cripple a large portion of his cultivation in order to cross over in advance. He was indeed not simple. These 2 attacked from the front and back and blocked off Chu Feng. "Bestow the treasures," Yu Wenfeng whispered. He instructed Bai Qing to deliver the secret treasures so that the 2 would have a 90% chance of capturing Chu Feng alive. He didn't want any more mishaps to happen. Bai Qing was his trusted aide and understood everything about him. She immediately gave a brass ring to the black iron tower-like knight and told him that this item could be used to deal with the secret treasures on Chu Feng's body. "Deliver another one," Yu Wenfeng whispered. Bai Qing understood. This time, she delivered a multicolored net to the 3-meter-tall knight. This was obviously to kill Chu Feng. It's quite targeted. Within the folded space of the other star passageway, the divine son Ji Ling revealed an odd expression as he fixed his gaze on the brass ring. He recognized that it was an imitation of a certain powerful weapon. He could use this ring to steal other people's weapons. It was impossible to guard against. "Oh, these are interesting." The old man who was playing chess with him nodded. Princess Lin was nearby and heard everything clearly. She realized that Chu Feng was in big trouble. The 100 Transformations Saint Child had personally bestowed treasures. This meant that he was determined to capture and kill Chu Feng. Even the divine son and the old man before her had spoken in such a manner. Qi Lin felt that things didn't bode well for Chu Feng. Qi Lin believed that the heavens chosen among the natives had luck. However, it was nothing once he encountered a serious divine son from the outer realm. In the end, he couldn't change his fate of being suppressed. At this time, Chu Feng's expression was solemn. He didn't dare to be careless and began to deploy domains in secret. If there were any accidents, he would use the domains to blast them to death on the famed mountains. At this time, the 2 knights surrounded Chu Feng, one in front and one behind. They were about to attack him. Beings from the carefree realm were indeed extraordinary. Their foresight, battle intent, and experience were even more terrifying. Here, that iron tower-like knight didn't have him out. He ran over with a loud shout and tossed out the brass ring. With a buzz, it expanded rapidly in the wind and emitted a blinding radiance. It was actually going to strip away the monastic robe on Chu Feng's body. This item was specialized in obtaining weapons and secret treasures. Chu Feng grasped the monastic robe tightly and revealed a serious expression. The secret treasure on his body was about to leave his body. Oh wait, I can still activate it. He was astonished to see the golden lines on the red monastic robe lit up one after another. It was extremely dazzling and became increasingly resplendent as it was being stripped away by the brass ring. This thing is a weapon for domain researchers. Chu Feng sighed in admiration. The golden lines on the monastic robe contained divine magnetism and were accompanied by domains. He activated it several times and discovered that its abilities were becoming increasingly unfathomable. Boom! The monastic robe trembled like a boiling sea of blood. It swept up the bronze ring in the air and shook it violently. With a crack, the bronze ring broke. How is this possible? Bai Qing cried out in alarm. Although the bronze ring was an imitation, it was still extraordinary. It was specialized in seizing people's secret treasures and had always been successful. But now it had been destroyed. Withdraw. The Iron Tower-like knight was quite decisive. He quickly brought out his second secret treasure, and a multicolored net flew out. It covered the sky and covered the earth as it moved toward Chu Feng to envelop him. At the same time, he and the knight on the green-furred lion charged forward one after the other. They attacked with all their might in a bid to kill Chu Feng. Chu Feng was increasingly satisfied with the monastic robe. This was a domain weapon. He was certain that it could only be revived in his hands. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to use it without activating their domains. With a boom, he shook it lightly. The monastic robe glowed with interweaving golden patterns which resonated with the magnetic stones laid down by the two deceased domain researchers. With a buzzing sound, Chu Feng used it to draw out the essence flames of extreme yang from the ground. The flames rushed up to meet the multicolored net and burned fiercely. There wasn't much essence flames of extreme yang underground, but it was enough to obstruct the net. At the same time, Chu Feng shook the monastic robe once again. Its body swelled up and rapidly enlarged. It swept through the air and, with a swoosh, swept down the large net. Chu Feng directly used the domain weapon to seize the treasure. Swoosh! The next moment, he tossed out the multicolored net. In the blink of an eye, it had enveloped the two powerful knights, charging over and captured them alive. Puffed, puffed. Chu Feng didn't hesitate. The bronze sword in his hand pierced through their foreheads and decisively took their lives. How was this possible? Many people cried out in alarm. Things had developed too quickly. At first, everyone thought that Chu Feng was about to lose, but in the blink of an eye, he had once again killed two experts and seized an extraordinary secret treasure. One person was faster than everyone else, and that was Huang Tong. He had taken advantage of the battle to escape into the folded space. He wiped his cold sweat continuously, feeling that Chu Feng was too savage. He felt somewhat regretful because it seemed he had provoked great trouble. But fortunately, he had met up with Yu Wenfeng's group and could receive protection. At this time, the depths of Mount Lu were in an uproar. The main reason was that Chu Feng had killed yet another enemy, and his secret treasure was too terrifying. Where did you get that Buddhist race monastic robe? The 100 Transformations Saint Child Yu Wenfeng asked with a serious expression. This was also the answer everyone wanted to know. Everyone could see that the monastic robe was extraordinary and not an ordinary secret treasure. I'm the reincarnation of a golden bodhisattva. Demon, come and pay your respects. Chu Feng shouted. The others felt their teeth aching, especially the divine son Ji Ling and the demon race Saintess Ji Xian. Their expressions were odd as they listened to him spout nonsense with a serious expression. Yu Wenfeng really wanted to chop Chu Feng to pieces. Today, his prestige as a saint child had been seriously challenged. Even if he could kill this rebel, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Saint Child Yu Wenfeng. I'm guessing that the monastic robe was given to him by Fairy Hu Ruoxian of Andromeda, Huang Tong reported. He was worried that Chu Feng would hunt him down all over the world. This wasn't a situation an interstellar hunter should face. Safety was the #1 priority. But now, he had no choice but to follow Yu Wenfeng to the end. Evil creature, lion dog. I'll find a rope to tie you up and walk the dog. Chu Feng reprimanded with a solemn expression. The lion-headed Huang Tong wanted to curse, but didn't dare. He regretted not leaving a way out for himself. What if this brat could counterattack the Saint Child? Andromeda's Hu Ruoxian? The 100 transformations, Saint Child's expression was gloomy. Chu Feng put on the monastic robe and said, "There's no harm in telling you. This monastic robe is an important weapon. Sister Ruoxian gave it to me to protect myself. In outer space, Hu Qingsheng witnessed the whole process." Seeing Chu Feng showing off on Mount Lu, she was both angry and anxious. She really wanted to slap him to death. According to Chu Feng, he and the Hu sisters were fated and had long since formed an alliance. That was why he had a Saintess-level treasure to protect himself. Moreover, many people who had followed him to Mount Lu confirmed that Chu Feng had gone to see Hu Ruoxian several times. At this time, Hu Qingsheng was incomparably distressed. This monastic robe was clearly extraordinary, but it wasn't valued after being given to her sister and was given away again. How preposterous! This mommy spent so much effort to trick a senior monk into giving it to you, yet you don't cherish it and then give it to a fake Heaven's Chosen. How hateful! Hu Qingsheng was furious. She knew that her sister, Hu Ruoxian, as a woman, didn't want to wear a monastic robe. As such, she didn't even study the secret treasure in detail before giving it away. Very soon, Yang Xian was vexed. That little thief on Mount Lu was trying to establish a relationship with their family and was talking about the bronze sword. He was so annoyed that his liver was in pain. Everyone on Mount Lu revealed odd expressions. This Chu Feng had a close relationship with the two saintesses, Yang Shan and Hu Ruoxian. "Shut up, traitor! I've tolerated you for too long. Just wait until the day I descend, and I'll skin you alive." Yu Wenfeng shouted. Chu Feng mocked him, saying, "You're a fake Saint Child. You haven't seen your abilities, but you love to talk big. How many of your subordinates have I slaughtered? In the end, you only dare to hide there and spit. What else can you do? Come out and fight me for 500 rounds if you have the guts. I'll chop you up. In my eyes, a traitor like you is incomparably weak. Once I cross the boundary, I'll slap you to death with a flip of my palm." Yu Wenfeng said coldly and didn't want to talk to him anymore. Bai Qing was indignant and said, "Traitor, you're always boasting. Come in if you have the guts. My master can crush you with one finger. What if you can't do anything to me if I go in?" Chu Feng smiled faintly. "Then I'll recognize you as my master," Bai Qing said hatefully. In the distance, the demon race saintess, Ji Xian, spoke with a smile. "Chu Feng, you're an interesting person. Are you willing to follow me? I'll bring you to the resplendent sea of stars and grant you an endless, glorious future." She directly roped Chu Feng in and made him follow her. As a descendant of the demonic sage, her status was very high. The expressions of the Peacock King and the 9 Lives Cat changed after hearing these words. Meanwhile, the 100 transformations, Saint Child Yu Wenfeng's expression also sank. The demon race saintess wanted to take in his enemy as a subordinate? Princess Lin was stunned. The demon race saintess had spoken like this. If he nodded and agreed, he would definitely receive protection and his future would be immeasurable. Chu Feng looked at Ji Xian and said, "You want me to follow you? That's impossible. The other way around is fine." The group was dumbfounded. How could the demon race saintess follow him? Then, Chu Feng looked at Yu Wenfeng and Bai Qing and said, "Are you ready? Wash your necks, I'm coming." Chapter 437. Chu Feng observed the terrain, his eyes flashing. Nearby, the green pines and cypresses on the mountain emitted a green glow, and the waterfalls hung down in large numbers. It was a rather spectacular sight. Clouds rose from the mountain, and it was extremely beautiful. He moved his feet, sizing up his surroundings from time to time. At the same time, he was trying to figure out where he came from, his eyes flickering. Everyone stared blankly for a moment before coming to a realization. This fellow was speaking so fiercely. Could it be that he was actually planning to run? In an instant, everyone was convinced that this was his style. He was thick-skinned and black-hearted. If he didn't run after taking advantage of her, then when? He didn't even suffer a loss when facing a saint child. To be more precise, he made Yu Wenfeng's people feel disgraced. This was something he could be proud of. Everyone was speechless. He ran after fighting. He was too cunning and slippery. The more they thought about it, the more certain they were that he was about to escape. Within the folded space, Yu Wenfeng's complexion was slightly dark. He felt sullen. He was a dignified saint child level character, yet he was actually being humiliated on Earth. Moreover, he couldn't retaliate even if he wanted to, because that native was clearly trying to run away. Bai Qing also realized that the traitor was actually trying to escape. His words were invincible, but his actions were actually so wretched. He wanted to escape after taking advantage of the situation. This time, they suffered a great loss. Not only did so many people die, but their secret treasure, the brass ring, was also broken, and the great rainbow net was even stolen by that native. This was too shameful and unsightly. "Rebel, are you afraid?" The Swan Fairy by Qing shouted delicately. She was dressed in a snow-white robe that was free of dust and dirt. However, her fair face carried a tinge of green. "What are you afraid of? All of you are defeated by me. This king is already invincible if I fight all of you alone." Chu Feng had an arrogant look on his face, but his eyes were looking for a way out. He was very cautious, as if he was worried that there might be an ambush along the way. Seeing this, Bai Qing revealed a slightly anxious expression. If he was allowed to leave, the Hunter Transformation's saint child would lose all face, and her reputation would be greatly damaged. Once news of this spread, she would definitely be looked down upon by the other saint children and goddesses, which would be extremely harmful. If he was seen as weak, there might be other divine princes deliberately suppressing him and snatching his opportunities when they were fighting for the opportunities on this planet in the future. "Come in if you have the guts." Bai Qing's pretty face was cold. She had a contemptuous attitude as she deliberately provoked him. "Just you wait, I'm going in right now." "Let's see who's going to beg for mercy then," Chu Feng said arrogantly, but he was still quietly observing the terrain behind him. "Then hurry up. Don't be timid." Bai Qing's eyes flickered. She was waiting for him to get close and was prepared to strike ruthlessly. "What's the rush? Will I die if I wait any longer?" Chu Feng replied casually. He secretly activated his eyes of fire and gold, wanting to see through the entire area. Now, everyone was wondering if he was going to run away, or was he really going to enter the folded space. At this moment, someone burst into laughter. It was the demon race's saintess, Ji Xian. She found the conversation between the two very funny. In an instant, many people were baffled, and some revealed strange expressions after thinking about it. When Bai Qing saw the peculiar gazes of the people around her, her face first flushed red, then became incomparably unsightly. She berated, "Rebel, you despicable bastard. How dare you take advantage of me?" Chu Feng wore an innocent expression. His thoughts were all on domains, so how could he think so much? At this time, even Princess Lin lowered her head. Her jade-like face was slightly red. She felt that the two were too dirty. What was going on? But after thinking about it, the demon race's saintess Ji Xian was too unrestrained. No one would misinterpret it if she didn't laugh. "Your Majesty, he's about to escape." At this time, a knight came forward and whispered. His face was twisted and his chest was surging with anger. Originally, these knights were very quiet and had an iron-like discipline. They were like statues. But now, seeing that Chu Feng was about to leave, they couldn't hold it in any longer. Their companions had been killed one after another, and the dignity and glory of the heavenly knights had been mercilessly trampled upon. They all wanted to kill that native and didn't want to let him leave. "Man, I'm going to the toilet. Wait for me. I'll be right back." Chu Feng suddenly spoke at this time. Everyone was petrified. Did they hear wrongly? What kind of lousy reason was this? As an evolved being, couldn't he be more reserved? Apparently, everyone believed that he was doing this on purpose. He was running away brazenly to humiliate the 100 transformations Saint Child Yuan Feng. In truth, Chu Feng was provoking them and provoking them to come out. Why wouldn't he use the natural geographical advantage? He would be more than happy to see the armored cavalry charge out in rage. At this time, not to mention the others, even Yuan Feng himself couldn't take it anymore. This traitor was provoking his dignity again and again, and he wanted nothing more than to trample him to death. Your Majesty, let me go. Master, I'll go and kill him. Some of them insisted on going out and would rather cripple part of their cultivation and drop to the shackled realm in order to charge out and kill Chu Feng and eradicate that traitor. Of course, they also made it clear that they needed powerful secret treasures. After all, that native's monastic robe was too strange and had a small, invincible momentum. Very well, go, bestow the treasures. Yuan Feng nodded. He had to admit that he was infuriated and wanted nothing more than to kill that native immediately. He didn't want to waste even a second. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to the knight's request under normal circumstances. These people weren't easy to nurture, and the seeds of becoming heavenly knights had already been planted in their bodies. Bai Qing's pretty face was cold. She had prepared a number of extraordinary secret treasures according to her orders and would immediately send them over once someone had crossed over successfully. Although Chu Feng was retreating, he was constantly paying attention to the folded space. His fiery eyes naturally saw everything clearly and was immediately delighted. He had succeeded in provoking some people to take the risk and come out. Within a split second, the 4 knights each mounted a golden leopard and rushed out with an imposing manner. As expected, the domains appeared and the ineffable laws of Earth began to operate. They began to suppress them in all aspects and were about to be obliterated. Roar! The 4 of them roared loudly. The golden-scaled leopards they were sitting on were also roaring, shaking Mount Lu and shocking many people. These were originally carefree realm entities. Now, they had severed their own cultivation and charged angrily into Earth's space to cross over. Even those descenders who had broken free from the restraints of the star passages on Mount Lu were nervous as they watched from the outside. They had experienced it personally and could empathize with it. They knew that this was the most dangerous and terrifying thing. Bang! Within a single breath, 2 knights exploded in succession and turned into 2 balls of flame. They didn't even have time to let out a groan before their bodies and souls were completely extinguished. Even their mounts suffered the same fate. Yu Wenfeng's face was ashen and his heart was pained. The remaining 2 howled in grief. Their mounts roared as they charged out amidst the flames. Receive this secret treasure, shouted Bai Qing. She quickly tossed out the corresponding weapons to let them kill Chu Feng. But these 2 weren't completely safe yet. There were still some domain patterns covering their bodies, but they should be able to escape successfully if nothing unexpected happened. However, Chu Feng was like a fierce tiger on the hunt. He had been waiting for a long time. At this moment, he was clad in a monastic robe, and his whole body erupted with scarlet light. He transformed into a bolt of red lightning and attacked fiercely. About Buddha. He finally chanted the name of Buddha as he attacked like a thunderbolt. But in the ears of Yu Wenfeng's group, it wasn't holy or beautiful at all. It was simply a demonic voice from hell, bringing with it great terror. Boom! The red monastic robe on Chu Feng's body trembled. The golden lines on it blossomed into patterns which interweaved together and pressed forward. It activated the domains that originally existed on the famed mountain and caused the dimmed flames on the 2 knights' bodies to erupt and flourish once again. Ah! The 2 screamed miserably as they were burned to ashes along with their mounts. The scene was terrifying. At the same time, the 2 secret treasures were also destroyed. Chu Feng felt his heart ache and sighed inwardly. What a pity. The surroundings were quiet. Everyone was stunned. Ah! Bai Qing screamed. She couldn't take it anymore and was about to go crazy. The 4 carefree realm knights had all perished. Originally, Two of them were about to succeed, but in the end, they were forcefully interrupted by that native, leading to their destruction. Yu Wenfeng clenched his fists and his eyes were spitting fire. This was the first time he had been so angry. He wanted nothing more than to bathe this planet in blood. He couldn't help but roar in a low voice. The more powerful knights beside him were also furious. Their eyes were about to split open as they let out long howls. They were like a group of bloodthirsty beasts about to destroy everything. The divine son Ji Ling was in a daze. The old man beside him was also watching intently. Qi Lin, who was standing to one side, was fairly shaken. Then, she felt a chill run down her spine. She felt that she had underestimated Chu Feng. He looked like he was laughing and laughing, but he was too good at seizing and creating opportunities. He had repeatedly embarrassed a saint child. However, she also felt that Chu Feng's situation would be even more dangerous unless he could defeat Yu Wenfeng head-on. He would suffer bloody revenge in the future and wouldn't have a good ending. But was it possible to defeat a saint child? You're ruthless and decisive. I like it. The demon race saintess Ji Xian giggled. She was very charming and restrained in her dignified manner. She said to Chu Feng, "Become my follower." Chu Feng stood in front of the folded space in a monastic robe draped over his shoulders. He looked very calm and said, "Boundless deity." The group of people couldn't take it anymore. Did the Buddhist race provoke you? This native was too close to the Tao race. As for Yu Wenfeng's subordinates, it was even more ear-piercing. They wanted nothing more than to chop him to death and dismember him into 8 pieces. Only now did Chu Feng turn around and look at Ji Xian, the descendant of the demon saint's direct line of descent. "I have a dream." The group of people was speechless. He was still talking about dreams in such a serious manner. Quite a few people felt their faces burn for him. "What is it?" Ji Xian asked with interest. "Hunting a few goddesses and saintesses to add incense to my sleeves, to sing and dance, and to warm my bed." He was so thick-skinned that he could be used as a chopping board. He spoke so boldly that everyone was immediately dumbfounded. Was he going to defy the heavens? The divine son Ji Ling, Princess Lin, and the demon race saintess Ji Xian were all tongue-tied. "Are you satisfied?" Chu Feng looked at Ji Xian. "Go to hell." The demon race saintess Ji Xian's face turned slightly red. She couldn't stand this no matter how unrestrained she was and really wanted to slap him. At this moment, not to mention the others, even the maddened Yu Wenfeng's face was twitching. As for Bai Qing, she had a stupefied expression. Qi Lin was petrified and completely dumbfounded under the pine tree. The Peacock King and the 9 Lives Cat looked at each other as though they had seen a ghost. In the end, they couldn't help but sigh. This demon King Chu was truly heaven-defying. His courage was frighteningly great, and he was indeed stronger than them. "Chu Feng, you incompetent scoundrel. Are you only good with words? No matter what you say, you're still a coward who doesn't dare to come in. If you have the guts, come over and I'll slap you to death." Bai Qing screamed frantically. She really didn't want Chu Feng to escape so far away. That would make them too vexed. Chu Feng turned around and looked at them with interest. Of course, he had to go in. He didn't understand the depths of Saint Child-level characters and didn't know how powerful people like Yu Wenfeng were. However, he still had some confidence in suddenly attacking and killing some knights. Did they really think he had gone to the moon for nothing? But in order to maximize the results of the battle, he couldn't enter in one step. He had to constantly provoke them and torment them, killing a few more people. Reality proved that the results were quite fruitful. Of course, in the eyes of Yu Wenfeng's people, he was undoubtedly repulsive and despicable. They even felt that this native was too lowly and wanted nothing more than to trample him to death. Chapter 438. Chu Feng strode forward with a solemn expression as if he was about to cross over at once. This made the group of people in the folded space rather nervous as they looked forward to that moment. Following his sudden halt, the hearts of Yu Wenfeng, Bai Qing, and the others also began to hang in suspense. Seeing him frown and stop there, Yu Wenfeng's pupils constricted. Then, he knew he had fallen into a disadvantageous position. How could a dignified saint's son from the outer realm lose his sense of propriety because of one person's actions? However, he was indignant, and the anger in his heart grew stronger and stronger. The main reason was that his dignity had been trampled on again and again today. He was on the verge of burning with rage. You rebel. In the end, you still don't have the guts. Your words are invincible, but you don't dare to put them into action. Bai Qing was furious and thought he was bluffing again. Chu Feng suddenly raised his head with a grave expression and said, "Shut up. The ones who are truly cowardly are you lot. Why don't you dare to come out?" Soon after, he asked with a solemn expression, "You once said that as long as I cross over into the folded space, you will consider me as your master. Is that true?" Upon hearing his question, Bai Qing didn't even think about it and immediately replied in a shrill voice, "Of course. I'm just afraid you don't have the guts and won't dare to take a step in your entire life. Fine, I'll go capture and kill you right now. I'll let you see what it means to swallow the world and dominate the universe. I'll kill all of you. You bunch of cowards don't even dare to cross over. What kind of heavenly knights are you? You can't even advance courageously. I think you should be called a faceless knight. Also, Yuan Feng, are you worthy of being called a saint's son? What qualifications do you have? I think you're still a saint's grandson." Chu Feng's taunts practically caused Yuan Feng to suffer internal injuries. His ancestor had once conquered this planet and killed countless rebels. Blood flowed like rivers under his feet, and there were countless corpses. Because of this, he obtained a great fortune and finally defied the heavens to become a saint. But he hadn't even walked out of the Star Passage and was humiliated again and again by a native. This contrast was too obvious and simply made him extremely infuriated. He had once declared that he would walk the path of his ancestor and conquer this planet. He would mercilessly kill the rebels and build the foundation to become a saint. Now his reputation had been completely ruined, and it was all because of that native. You. Bai Qing pointed at Chu Feng with a livid expression. For a moment, she was speechless. All of you retreat. This king wants to charge in. If the battlefield is too small, I won't be able to move freely. In a while, I'll kill all of you." Chu Feng shouted, asking them to make space for him. His entire body was brimming with killing intent, completely looking like he was about to start a massacre. Nearby, everyone was stunned. Was this native for real? Instead of running after taking advantage of the situation, he actually wanted to barge in? In the eyes of many, he was courting death and was overly arrogant. If he really dared to recklessly charge into the folded space, he would definitely be killed in both body and soul. Under Chu Feng's stern rebuke, Yuan Feng and Bai Qing pinched their noses and endured. They retreated again and again, leaving behind a vast battlefield to see if he really dared to come in. As long as he dared to set foot in here, Yuan Feng swore that he would make him wish he was dead. He would make him regret coming to this world and suffer bloody torture, making him beg for death. Bang! Under everyone's gazes, Chu Feng moved. He really did step into the folded space and charged straight in. "Good, you have guts," Yuan Feng shouted. He was deeply surprised and said coldly, "Come and fight." His hands were trembling from excitement and excitement. After enduring for so long, he could finally attack this traitor. He wanted to make him howl in grief and regret living in this world. Bai Qing was shocked. She had never imagined that Chu Feng would actually come to throw away his life. He was so ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth. The divine son Ji Ling and the demon race saintess Ji Xian were also stunned. They simply couldn't believe it. They had never expected Chu Feng to be so unwise. This was completely suicidal. Princess Lin was dumbfounded. She felt that Chu Feng was committing suicide. However, before everyone's expressions had completely stabilized, Chu Feng's next move left everyone dumbstruck. He took a step forward and then retreated with a swoosh on the second step. Moreover, he retreated exceptionally far and was as slippery as a loach. What was going on? Everyone was puzzled. Wasn't he going to make a huge commotion and swallow the mountains and rivers? Why was he running away without any backbone? Was this fear at the last moment? Was he completely terrified? Only when Chu Feng righteously shouted in a deadpan manner did everyone realize what was going on. They were immediately petrified as if they had seen a ghost. Bai Qing, hurry up and recognize me as your master. This seed has already entered the folded space just now. I'm here to fulfill my promise. He had a solemn expression as if he had done something extraordinary. Yen #% and everyone was petrified and dumbfounded by his attitude. Even the Peacock King and the Nine Lives Cat were tongue-tied and sighed inwardly. Just how thick was his skin? I underestimated him. The demon race Saintess Ji Xian sighed and then added, he's even more shameless than I imagined. To be precise, he's thick-skinned and black-hearted. No wonder he's still alive and kicking. As for the folded space, Bai Qing was furious after experiencing confusion and astonishment. This was going too far. She wanted to curse. This traitor had mobilized such a large force just to make fun of her. Bai Qing, are you going to go back on your word? Come over and pay your respects. Chu Feng shouted from afar. F***CK. Bai Qing flipped out and even started spewing out profanities. Her shrill voice was incessant. Moreover, she rushed to the edge of the folded space and unleashed her secret techniques to her heart's content. In truth, the iron-blooded knight's eyes had also turned red. They came to the edge like crazy and bombarded indiscriminately. They wanted nothing more than to directly blow up Chu Feng. However, the distance was too far and it was completely useless. From their point of view, this native was too shameless. He was completely toying with them. It was truly preposterous. Chu Feng squinted his eyes and secretly evaluated. The effect was indeed extraordinarily good. This group of people were all infuriated and arrived at the edge of the folded space. Only Yu Wenfeng was very silent. He stood motionlessly in the depths of the folded space. At this moment, he was as silent as a stone statue. The main thing was that he was extremely furious. He had been tormented again and again by the native in his eyes. If word of this were spread, what prestige would he have left? It would be of no use, even if he were to immediately kill this traitor. What had just happened could no longer be changed. Yu Wenfeng relied on his identity and stood motionlessly in the depths of the folded space. He believed that Chu Feng wouldn't come in and that everything he did was to humiliate him. At this moment, his eyes were cold and indistinct. They were almost empty as he silently pondered. He was thinking about how to exterminate Chu Feng's entire clan when he could step into Earth space in the future. He was going to kill him until his heart bled, and he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. The corners of Chu Feng's mouth curled into a smile, but it was somewhat cold. He had originally anticipated that he would most likely have to torment himself a few times before he could achieve this result. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly and had already met his attack standards from the very beginning. At present, Yu Wenfeng, whose strength was inestimable, was in the distance. Only Bai Qing and a group of knights were close by. They stuck close to the edge of the folded space and were roaring angrily. They wanted nothing more than to kill their way out. Chu Feng was preparing. His eyes were faintly discernible. He had long since thoroughly observed the surrounding terrain. After that, he was about to make his move. At this moment, almost no one believed that he would charge into the folded space. They didn't dare attack because they all thought he was playing with Yu Wenfeng. So much so that some people revealed disdainful expressions. They felt that this was too frivolous and simply didn't match his status as the Heaven Chosen. He wasn't steady enough and wouldn't be able to accomplish great things. However, when the next moment arrived, everyone opened their eyes wide and were horrified. All of them were shaken. Chu Feng moved. He was incomparably berserk and violent like a volcanic eruption. A pair of luminous wings appeared on his back, and his kidney chi boiled to provide him with energy. He charged rapidly into the folded space. It was too sudden. Almost no one had expected him to make his move at the last moment. He dared to strike a rock with an egg. Of course, this was only a misconception. They mistakenly thought that this kind of action would cause him to fall. In an instant, there was a result. The monastic robe on Chu Feng's body glowed, and scarlet multicolored light undulated like a vast ocean. He had activated the true might of this secret domain treasure. Of course, the most important thing was that divine light soared up from underground. That was the domain contained within the famed mountain. It was awakening and being activated to strangle everything. This place wasn't just any other place but Mount Lu, one of the most famous mountains in the world. There was no lack of domains in such a place. With Chu Feng's abilities after returning from the moon, how could he not sense it? He had long since been observing it. Additionally, his fiery eyes were fully activated at this moment, and he could see through everything. Not only had he activated the domain, but his forehead was also glowing and rewriting the domain. He was using his spiritual power to complete the grand feat of inscribing runes in an instant. At the same time, countless magnetic stones flew out from the spatial bottle on his body and drowned out the area in front of him. This was a domain tide as he attacked crazily. At this moment, the red monastic robe on his body trembled and was about to cover the sky and earth. It worked together with the surrounding domains and filled the area with a torrential murderous intent. Boom! The sky fell and the earth split. Multicolored light surged and domain chi surged in the periphery of the folded space. One could see beams of divine radiance interweaving and dancing in the air, turning the area into a hellish battlefield. It was a killing field constructed of energy. A knight let out a miserable cry as he was torn apart along with his mount and exploded into a mist of blood. Following which, the second knight let out a furious roar as his entire body was cut apart by the domain chi and his head separated from his body. One after another, the situation was reversed in the blink of an eye. The sky and earth were turned upside down. This place had become a bloody massacre, and the ground was littered with broken limbs. It was a shocking sight. No one had expected the unforeseen event to be so sudden and so bitter. Just now, the group of knights was surging with killing intent and exuberant vitality. In the blink of an eye, a pile of dead and wounded had been slaughtered. Everyone was stunned and felt their hair stand on end. This was too sudden. No one had expected the smiling Chu Feng to change in an instant. He was no longer frivolous and smiling, but had turned into an iron-blooded demon king. At this moment, he was incomparably cold-blooded and callous. He charged forward with a monastic robe draped over his shoulders. His forehead glowed, and various magnetic stones danced about. They flooded the area and formed one offensive domain after another with surging killing intent. A knight's forehead was pierced through. He was overwhelmed even in death because he hadn't expected things to turn out this way. Bang! Some knights were killed by the domains and directly turned into mush. Their entire bodies were engulfed by the domain chi, and even their bones were rotting, accompanied by a splatter of blood. The divine Sun Ji Ling and the demonic Saintess Ji Xian were ineffably shaken. This kind of bloody scene caused them to tremble in fear. They had actually been deceived. This native was somewhat terrifying. He had actually launched a counterattack at the last moment. Most importantly, he actually had such ability and methods. He was a heavenly genius among domain researchers. This was their unanimous evaluation. Such iron-blooded methods and such powerful domains weren't something an ordinary person could activate in an instant. Princess Lin's face turned pale. She was shaken and felt her heart tremble. Was this still the Chu Feng she knew? He was simply a god of death. He could really challenge a saint-child-level character. Her previous thoughts were gravely mistaken. This was definitely not some pitiful lamb, but an iron-blooded demon king. Yuan Feng howled. No one at the scene saw his intense reaction. His eyes were as red as blood. What calmness! What gentleness! They had long since become irrelevant to him. His hair was disheveled as he leapt several kilometers in a single leap. In truth, he reacted even faster than the others and rushed to the rescue immediately. He wanted nothing more than to slap Chu Feng into mush. He wanted to beat this cold-blooded executioner to pieces, but he was actually blocked by his own people. There was a group of knights between him and Chu Feng. He had no way to launch a long-range attack. Chu Feng was fairly decisive. He relied on his domains to launch a thunderous attack. He arranged the magnetic stones properly and then fled in the blink of an eye. He was extremely decisive without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Of course, he brought out the multicolored net at the last moment. This was the spoils of war he had seized from Yu Wenfeng's group. Now, he was using it against them. Qi. The multicolored net covered by Qing as he retreated. It directly dragged her out of the death swamp and captured her alive. This woman wasn't simple at all. She had more than one secret treasure on her, and her defenses were astonishing. She didn't die in the domain the first time. Now, she had been captured by Chu Feng during the chaos and brought out. Behind Chu Feng, the ground was littered with severed limbs and rivers of blood. It was like a scene of Azura, and the number of knights alive had decreased sharply by more than half. Meanwhile, he was carrying the captive in his hand. He had retreated far into the distance and returned to Earth space, standing in a safe zone. Chapter 439. In the depths of Mount Lu, people from all walks of life were shaken. Chu Feng suddenly became iron-blooded and truly charged into the folded space. The results of the battle were astonishing, and everyone froze there like clay sculptures. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Just now, he was still laughing and joking, making people feel that he wasn't steady enough. Who would have thought that his temperament would suddenly change, and he would attack like a demonic god? Chu Feng charged in alone and caused rivers of blood to flow, men and horses to be thrown off their feet, and a group of knights collapsed in pools of blood. What kind of glorious accomplishment was this? How could a native evolver be this strong? Many people were dumbfounded. This kind of situation had far exceeded everyone's expectations. At present, the knights were howling in grief, and everyone was watching in silence. It was a human tragedy. The grass had been dyed red, and the pungent smell of blood could be smelled from far away. There were mutilated bodies everywhere, and none of the knights and beasts that had been strangled were whole. Field Qi interweaved like silk and strands. It cut apart one mount after another and dismembered those powerful knights. Yu Wenfeng let out a low roar. His long hair danced chaotically, and the corners of his eyes were about to split open. He circulated his breathing technique, and the aura coming from his mouth and nose was terrifying. The surrounding forest exploded. He couldn't bear it any longer. He was like a wounded beast as he attacked frantically to save his subordinates. It was too miserable. This was like a scene from hell. Broken arms, broken legs, and rolling heads were all the knights. They hadn't even set foot in Earth's main space when they were killed by Chu Feng. Chu Feng, you rebel, bastard native. Yu Wenfeng roared with a terrifying expression. There weren't many knights around him, and he was furious. He really wanted to kill his way out and kill that person with his own hands. At this time, the domain dimmed and the beams of light disappeared. Because the materials weren't up to standard, many of the magnetic stones had disintegrated. They were all disposable consumables. More than two-thirds of the dozens of knights had died, and now there were only a dozen or so people by Yu Wenfeng's side. Moreover, they were all wounded and drenched in blood. As for their mounts, some were lame, some had their tails cut off, and some had bones growing out of their bodies. Many were lying limp on the ground, already on the verge of death. This battle was too bitter. Yu Wenfeng's troops suffered heavy losses and were unable to recover from the setback. Yu Wenfeng, the saint child, had the halo above his head smashed away. He had lost the dignity he should have had. He was beaten black and blue by a native, and more than half of his subordinates were annihilated. This was a great defeat that shocked everyone. Without a doubt, this matter would spread from this place to every star passage. His reputation would be tarnished, and he might even be ridiculed by everyone. Once he was looked down upon, his status as a holy son would plummet. It was even to the extent that there might be people who were eager to take over his position in the base camp of his star path. This battle was too terrible for him, and the impact it had on him was extremely negative. Rebel. Yu Wenfeng clenched his teeth and stood at the edge of the folded space. His long hair, which was as bright as a mirror, stood erect like a black waterfall flowing in reverse. He had never been in such pain before. He felt as if his entire body was burning, and a wave of anger made him want to explode. This kind of crushing defeat was difficult for him to accept. At the same time, he already understood what the consequences would be. Even if he hadn't taken action himself, his troops would still be in disarray. This kind of achievement would be attributed to him. On Mount Lu, everyone was in a rare silence because they were all a bit scared. This Chu Feng, the heavens chosen among the natives, was too unexpected. Chu Feng looked around and was rather displeased to see that Huang Tong was completely unharmed within the folded space. The lion-headed Huang Tong's thoughts were quite meticulous. He hadn't even approached the danger zone and had successfully escaped this calamity. Now, he was cautious and stood behind those knights with a rather guilty conscience. He was scared stiff because Chu Feng's methods made his scalp go numb. It was too heaven-defying. He had single-handedly eliminated more than half of his Saint Child's troops. Regardless of whether it was a trick or a heaven-defying method, the most important thing was the result. The native heavens chosen had won. This made his hair stand on end, and a chill ran down his spine. He felt that he had provoked a great deal of trouble. If he had a choice, he really didn't want to cheat Chu Feng because he believed it to be extremely dangerous. Chu Feng felt his teeth ache as he stared at Huang Tong for a long time. This bastard didn't die, and his expression became unkind. "Just you wait, Pekingese. I'll find a dog chain to tie you up later," shouted Chu Feng. Huang Tong cursed in secret, but didn't dare utter a word. Beside Chu Feng, the multicolored net was glowing and binding by Qing, making it difficult for her to budge. "Recognize me as your master." Chu Feng accepted a servant in front of everyone and paid no attention to the furious Yuan Feng. He didn't want to talk to that madman. Bah! Bai Qing was ashamed and resentful, but she was also disdainful. Although she had been captured alive, she wasn't willing to lower her head. "You admit defeat. Don't you want to fulfill your promise?" Chu Feng smiled faintly and lowered his head to look at her, revealing some killing intent. This woman had long since succeeded in crossing over. Previously, she had danced on the mountain peak and was responsible for guiding Chu Feng into the ambush. She was originally an evolver of the carefree realm, but she had crippled her cultivation in order to enter the main space of Earth. Now, she was at the 12th level of the Shackle realm. Additionally, she wasn't a combat type and thus wasn't the main attacker. Even if she could cross over, she wouldn't dare to tread lightly. Now that she had been captured by Chu Feng, the situation wasn't looking good. "You want me to yield? Impossible." She sneered repeatedly and tilted her head to one side. "Let go of her. We'll talk about the conditions." Yuan Feng, who was in the folded space, stopped shouting and stared at Chu Feng. Chu Feng still didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he began to skillfully plunder the large net and took out the secret treasures from it. This woman had a lot of good things on her body. First, there was an extraordinary umbrella made of black gold with an unknown beast's skin as its cover. Unfortunately, this weapon with astonishing defensive power had been damaged in the battle just now. If not for this umbrella, Bai Qing's body would have been torn apart by the domains, and she would have died there. "You've damaged my umbrella." Chu Feng was so distressed that he had no choice but to put down the secret treasure. The people around him were all speechless. "Was that your umbrella?" It seemed like it was now. Bai Qing's pretty face was unsightly. This was truly a humiliation. As for within the folded space, Yuan Feng was even more furious. Meanwhile, the dozen or so most powerful knights who had managed to survive had scarlet eyes. They wanted nothing more than to eat Chu Feng's flesh. "This golden lamp is also damaged. It's cracked all over. My secret treasure." Chu Feng howled in grief. The demon race Saintess Ji Xian's expression was odd as she whispered, "This fellow." She really didn't know how to evaluate this native. When she mentioned asking him to follow her, he even wanted to take her in. "You take your hands off me." Bai Qing was furious. Chu Feng was searching her body randomly and couldn't avoid touching certain parts of her body. This filled her with hatred and anger. Now that she was a prisoner, she felt sullen and humiliated. "Oh, one of my secret treasures is finally intact." Chu Feng was overjoyed. He was holding a light, golden hemp rope in his hand. This wasn't the first time he had seen this thing. Moreover, he had been attacked every time. This was the spirit binding rope. It was exceptionally useful against shackled realm cultivators. It was very difficult for the enemy to escape. Were it not for the fact that Chu Feng had borrowed the essence flames of extreme yang from the diamond chakram to resist, he would have been tied up by Han Wenze and Huang Weiyue the first time. Could it be that this is a standard one? Every power has it, but it's really not bad. Chu Feng was quite satisfied as he put it away. Next, he put away a dark red spear which seemed to be dyed in blood. It was very intimidating and heavy at the same time. This was an undamaged heavy weapon. In the end, he obtained 3 arrows made of polished beast bones. They looked very extraordinary and carried a terrifying, baleful aura. It was expected that they would be very astonishing if they were to be shot. There weren't any heaven-defying secret treasures, but Chu Feng was already very satisfied. At the present stage, there was no way to bring over excessively extraordinary weapons. It was very difficult to cross over. As for the monastic robe on his body, there was definitely something odd about it. The domain within it was intermittent and hadn't been completely connected. It required him, a domain researcher, to activate it himself. Ordinary creatures couldn't use it at all. It was considered a defective product. Doubtlessly, some of the weapons used after crossing over were on by Qing's body. She was like a small treasure trove. The only unfortunate thing was that some of them had been completely destroyed. At this time, Chu Feng raised his head and looked at Yu Wenfeng in the folded space. "Speaking of which, you've also given me some secret treasures. I really have to thank you, while scattering boy." Then, he said with a smile, "From now on, please call me Taoist of many treasures." "Ah, no, this name is inauspicious. Please call me Sage Master of many treasures." F***CK. Yu Wenfeng was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. He had become the wealth-scattering boy. He reckoned this name would be spread by people with ulterior motives, and he would become a laughingstock. Wealth-scattering boy, this name is really appropriate. The demon race saintess Ji Xian was the first to nod with a smile. She didn't even try to hide her approval of this saying. The divine son Ji Ling let out a laugh, expressing his interest. This caused Yu Wenfeng to burn with anger as he stared at the two. He knew that after today, he would definitely be mocked for a long time. Princess Lin stared at Chu Feng's back and was indescribably shaken. A native evolver had actually tormented a divine son so miserably. This was too extraordinary. She couldn't help but tremble when she thought of Chu Feng's domain methods. He was definitely a heavenly genius at this age. She knew she had missed certain opportunities. She sighed lightly. If she had expressed goodwill earlier, the result would have been completely different. This was a rapidly growing crocodile. The next moment, she felt the divine Sun Jiling's change. His eyes were burning as he stared at Chu Feng. Domain researchers were all very respectful, no matter which planet they were on. This was especially true for such heavenly geniuses. They were rare even in the outer realms and would be fought over by famous figures to be their disciples. At the same time, the demonic sage's direct descendant Ji Xian revealed an odd expression as she stared fixedly at Chu Feng. She thought highly of his domain methods and believed that he would definitely become a grandmaster if given time. Such a character was worth roping in. One had to know that a grandmaster domain researcher had incomparably revered status. Everyone wanted to rope them in, and even the nobility had to be respectful and not dare offend them. Ji Xian held a jade cup in her hand. The green wine in the cup was fragrant. She drained it in one gulp and placed it on the table. Then, she stood up, revealing her slender and alluring figure. She smiled sweetly, causing the entire place to brighten up. "Brother Chu, why don't you think about it? Come to the holy land of our peacock lineage, and we'll provide you with an endless supply of domain books. Your future will be bright." Everyone was shaken after hearing these words. As they saw it, the demon race saintess had lowered herself and was seriously roping in the native heavens chosen. Even an orthodoxy with a peerless demonic sage was yearning for a heavenly genius in domains. This made everyone feel a sense of urgency. "Oh, Brother Chu, how about coming to our lineage? The Heavenly Note Church will do our best to satisfy your needs. We have a large number of domain books for you to read," said the divine son Ji Ling with a smile. He was also roping in Chu Feng. Princess Lin's mood was complicated. Even the divine son she was relying on was trying to rope in Chu Feng. The Peacock King and the Nine Lives Cat were shaken and somewhat restless. Yu Wenfeng's expression was ashen and incomparably ugly. He had just suffered a setback and lost all face. Yet these two were already trying to poach him. They didn't even care about his feelings and were roping in his enemies. This was simply preposterous. Chapter 440. Yu Wenfeng was in a terrible mood. The traitor in his eyes was now beaming with joy and chatting happily with the divine son and saintess. It was as if they were about to hook up. As a fellow traveler from the Star Passage and a well-known figure on a certain planet, the divine son Ji Ling and the demon race saintess Ji Xian completely disregarded his feelings. This made his eyes turn cold. The side effects of his defeat had appeared. It was just the beginning, but the other divine sons and saintesses were already looking down on him and not taking him seriously. What would happen in the future? When the true era of divine sons and saints came, he might be the first to be eliminated. This was the law of the weak. Everyone wanted to step on him and pick on the soft persimmon to pinch. At the thought of this, Yu Wenfeng's expression was as gloomy as water. He turned around and led the crowd away from the edge of the folded space. Upon seeing this, Chu Feng shouted, "Wealth-scattering boy, please stay. Leave that Pekingese behind in exchange for your maid's life." At this moment, Huang Tong's soul was about to fly out of his body. His face was pale because he would rather die if he were to be handed over. He might as well commit suicide now. "Saint's son, save me." As a being who aspired to become an interstellar hunter, he was never stubborn and had no bottom line. He burst into tears on the spot and begged Yu Wenfeng not to hand him over. "I'm not that untrustworthy. I promise to protect your life during our cooperation," Yu Wenfeng said coldly. Then he suddenly turned around and looked back at Chu Feng, saying, "You can have my maid." With that, he left without looking back and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Master," Bai Qing cried out mournfully. She was both afraid and disappointed that Yu Wenfeng had abandoned her. "Let's talk. Tell me everything you know." Chu Feng looked at her with a smile. "There's nothing to say." Bai Qing turned around and didn't look at him at all. Her expression was cold once again. Chu Feng threatened, "White duck, you've already been abandoned. There's no need to be like this. Don't force me to turn you into a roast duck. I know the old Quan Jude recipe." Bai Qing was ashamed and resentful. She was a true white swan, but this person always called her a duck. She said coldly, "I have nothing to say to you. Once I die, the saint's son will avenge me and exterminate your 9 generations. He'll make you wish you were dead." This woman was very tough and somewhat unafraid of death. "Then you can go on your way," Chu Feng coldly said. He did not need to thoroughly understand the Yu Wenfamily's people. It was enough for him to know that they were descendants of Star Knights. The descendants of that group of cruel and inhumane executioners wanted to walk the path of their ancestors. To him, there was no other choice but to kill without mercy. Chu Feng held a bronze sword and chopped off one of her arms. This was a swan wing, forcing her to reveal her true form. Bai Qing screamed. She was suppressed by Chu Feng to the point where she transformed into a white swan. Her feathers were snow white and she was enormous. She had lost a wing and was dripping with blood. Her eyes were filled with incomparable resentment. "It's a pity that Toad isn't here." Chu Feng looked at his mount and sighed softly. A toad lusting after a swan's flesh, this was not a joke. Chu Feng really wanted to turn her into a roast duck and feast on her, but he found that he couldn't bring himself to do it. It wasn't sympathy. He wouldn't have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex after seeing her resentful eyes. The main thing was that she was still in human form just a moment ago and was no different from a human. The next moment, he would directly eat her. That would truly be disgusting. Chu Feng felt that if he let her transform into her true form and let her roam here for a couple of days, she would look more like a wild animal, and perhaps she wouldn't have any psychological shadows. However, he had to go to Mount Longhu immediately and immediately lost the mood. In the end, Chu Feng gave her a quick death. He beheaded her with a single slash and no longer paid her any attention. This battle had thoroughly come to an end. Whether it was Ji Xian, Ji Ling, or the others, there was no one who wasn't shaken. The saint child from the starry skies, Yuan Feng, had been defeated. This overturned many people's views. Without a doubt, this battle had a great impact. A native had relied on his own strength to beat a saint child level character into a sorry state. He had no choice but to escape into the depths of a folded space and was too ashamed to see anyone. This would create a storm. At this stage, anyone who wanted to face this native heaven's chosen would have to think twice. If they were to really become enemies, it was very likely that Yuan Feng would become the second. This was especially true when people recalled how he had previously acted wantonly on Mount Lao and chased away a heavenly prince from an imperial dynasty of evolvers. This was somewhat astonishing. Previously, there were rumors that the great Qi prince, Qi Yu, had retreated because someone else had taken action. People weren't too convinced that it was Chu Feng's doing. Now, it seemed that he had that kind of strength and methods. Before leaving, Chu Feng made continuous arrangements. He improved and gradually activated the domains of Mount Lu in the outer region of the folded space where Yuan Feng was located. He was convinced that the price people on this star passage would have to pay would be even greater than before if they wanted to come out. It was still difficult for him to come into contact with the domains of the famed mountain's main peaks, but he could easily control and even modify the ancient traces in this area. The divine son Ji Ling and the demon race saintess Ji Xian drew in a breath of cold air after witnessing this scene. This Chu Feng was truly ruthless. He wanted to block Yuan Feng's path to death. At the current stage, all divine sons and saintesses had to face this native heaven's chosen seriously. Once they offended him, it would be very difficult to cross over. Didn't they see what happened to Yuan Feng and that prince from Mount Lao? It was a foregone conclusion. An undercurrent and a huge storm was brewing. Chu Feng had become a troublesome character that even Saint Child-level characters had to consider. No one dared to offend him rashly. So much so that all parties wanted to rope him in because his talents and domains were somewhat heaven-defying. As Chu Feng slowly left, the descenders who had followed him from Mount Lu were all scared out of their wits. They were incomparably reverent of him and quickly made way for him. In outer space, Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan's hearts were rising and falling. They were greatly astonished and shaken by Chu Feng's methods. At this point, Yang Xian suspected that the heavens chosen he had inadvertently created might actually be true. This Chu Feng was too powerful. However, Qinglan shook his head and said, "Before this, I felt that he was most likely the heavens chosen. Otherwise, why else would you guys be jumping about in anger? But now I'm not so sure. I suspect that he's a false one who exists to conceal the true one and protect the true heavens chosen." His point of view was quite novel, but Yang Xian and Hu Qingxing drew in a breath of cold air after recalling some of the historical records and events of the past. Indeed, such things had happened more than once in ancient times. The false one would disturb people's vision, but when the true one appeared, the world would be in turmoil. He would gather all the resources and fortunes in one body, and his rise would be so violent that it shocked everyone. He was simply unstoppable. Every era with a false one would be extremely terrifying because the true one would erupt with a radiance that could shake an entire era. This is very possible. Yang Xian's hair stood on end. He recalled the glory of this planet. It was once ranked 11th and had been silent for countless years. Now that it had begun to awaken, it was bound to produce a world-shattering flood. The various divine sons and saintesses had rushed here precisely because they wanted to take advantage of this flood. A year of cultivation here was equivalent to a decade or even 100 years in other regions. There's definitely a false one. Hu Qingqing also came to this conclusion. So much so that they had already spied on Chu Feng and realized that he was a false one to attract everyone's attention. Momentarily, they were scared out of their wits. How terrifying would it be when the true one came out? Yes, it said that there's a primal chaos energy pagoda on Earth. That's a peerless inheritance that even the top 10 planets covet. But it's already completely disappeared, and it was most likely prepared for the true one. This Chu Feng's attainments and domains are astonishing. It seems he was born to protect the true one. Yes, there's a saying that domain researchers can inherit that orthodoxy and can only serve it. Yang Xian and Qing Lan discussed some taboo topics. Those were things their ancestors had discussed in private, and they had heard bits and pieces of it. It seems the true one is indeed hiding in the dark. Hu Qingqiang was shaken. The three wore serious expressions. They felt that the various divine sons and saintesses wouldn't be able to gain any advantage in the end. They had no fate with the inheritance of the primal chaos energy pagoda. On Mount Lu, Chu Feng was walking out. Sister-in-law, thank you. Your monastic robe isn't bad. I'll go see your sister later. Chu Feng looked up at the void and said in all seriousness. He felt that the woman might be spying on him. In outer space, the three's discussion came to an abrupt end. Hu Qingqing's expression turned dark. Speaking of which, she felt quite distressed because that monastic robe was an extraordinary secret treasure. Brother-in-law, your bronze sword is SOSO. I can't see anything special about it apart from its sturdiness. Yang Xian's expression became unsightly after hearing Chu Feng's words. Following which, the people on Mount Lu saw a miraculous scene. Beams of divine light descended from the sky and shot toward Chu Feng. Meanwhile, he walked out calmly while humming a song. Not to mention the others. Even the divine son Ji Ling and the demon race saintess Ji Xian were dumbfounded. Princess Lin was so shaken that her heart was trembling. People became even more convinced that this was the heavens chosen. This was especially true after seeing Chu Feng's calm demeanor. It was as though he was used to this and didn't care about the phenomena at all. In outer space, Yang Xian and Hu Qingqiang were ashamed. They finally stopped because they had broken their taboo again. In the distance, Qing Lan's expression was unsightly as he warned them. If people find out, the three of us will suffer miserably. You can't change anything, but you've disrupted the judgment of the divine sons and saintesses. At this time, Yang Xian felt a chill run down his spine. He muttered in disbelief, I'm scared now. Do you think I did those things because I was affected by the will of this planet? Everything was for the sake of pushing out the fake one. It's possible. I want to leave this place. Chu Feng walked out of Mount Lu and drove the emerald bamboo raft. He had just set off when a shout arrived from the front. Chu Feng, let's see where you can run to. Chun Sheng is here. A battleship appeared over the horizon. The young master of the Penglai Chun lineage appeared with a cold expression. A number of experts followed him, all of them surging with killing intent. The group of descenders in front of Mount Lu wore odd expressions. Demon King Chu had just displayed his divine might, yet someone was already knocking on his door, following which they thought of something. The incident on the mountain had just happened and hadn't spread yet. This unlucky Chen Sion still didn't know about it. He must be tired of living. Ha ha, Chu Feng, why don't you keep running? Chun Sheng was incomparably sinister. He had brought people to block this place and wanted to kill Chu Feng. That was because he had just received news that Chu Feng had entered Mount Lu. He immediately gathered his men and came personally to hunt him down. Young master, run. It was at this time that a bird king shouted anxiously. It had come out Mount Lu before Chu Feng and had already gone to meet Chen Sheng. Chen Sheng was puzzled. Chu Feng has defied the heavens. He single-handedly killed a saint child on Mount Lu. His troops were defeated and blood flowed like a river. Run. What? Chen Sheng's face turned pale after hearing this, and his body began to sway. This result was difficult for him to accept, but he was also quite decisive. He shouted, "Run! Run!" At this time, Chu Feng's eyes were cold as he began to pounce from afar. A pair of energy wings unfurled behind his back as he shot over at lightning speed. The large ship tore through the sky as it fled frantically. Everyone was speechless. The overbearing Chun family young master had actually begun to flee in such a sorry state after learning of the situation. He's caught up, quickly use a void jump, and return to the sea region of Penglai. The Chun family young master, Chun Sheng, screamed. He was both shocked and terrified. The battleship is damaged and might not succeed. We just cleared it out from the ruins. There are many problems. An old man on the battleship shouted anxiously. We can't care so much. Quickly, Chun Sheng said furiously. Buzz. In the end, the void trembled and the entire battleship became blurry. It was about to disappear into a hazy area. That place was like a swamp, but also like a door. Chu Feng was furious. He was about to catch up, and the battleship was about to disappear. Without a second thought, he produced a bone arrow. It was one of the 3 arrows he had obtained from Bai Qing's body. He placed on a thunderous bow and quickly shot it at Chun Sheng. Puffed. In the end, a ball of light blossomed, and Chun Sheng screamed miserably. He tried his best to evade, but one of his arms exploded and turned into a bloody mist. Moreover, a large hole appeared on the battleship. After a period of turmoil, the battleship finally disappeared. Everything was silent. Demon King Chu was too savage and shocked everyone. He had even shot the young master of the Chun family of Penglai to death. He was too domineering. Who could keep him in check now? However, there are also people who were laughing coldly. We've seen him build a vermilion pavilion. We've seen him entertain guests. And we've seen his pavilion collapse. Look at how splendid and dazzling he is. It's more likely that this is a sign of his decline. Some people had cold expressions and malicious intentions. However, most people were sighing in admiration. They unanimously believed that Demon King Chu Feng had officially risen and that no one could shake his position in the short term. He would advance triumphantly. When the news reached the outside world, all major powers were shaken. Defeating a group of saint children? Demon King Chu has finally extended his demonic claws to the extraterrestrials. This is very Chu Feng. Some ordinary people, corporations, and acquaintances made different evaluations. Chapter 441. Boss Chu has finally extended his evil demonic hand towards those haughty extraterrestrials. Even a saint child has been destroyed. The 3 corpses god is furious. The clairvoyant Du Huaijin mumbled. From now on, who in the outer realms doesn't know Demon King Chu? Ouyang Qing, Yi Qingru, and the others were deeply moved. Ever since they got to know Chu Feng, he had been tormenting everyone's nerves. His accomplishments were more and more shocking. The entire world was talking about this matter and caused a huge commotion. Chu Feng had single-handedly killed a group of saint children. This was earth-shattering and made all the evolvers in the east and west dumbfounded. It was the same in the ocean. The various marine race tribes were dumbfounded after hearing this. It was said that the elder dragon king of the southern sea swore that he would obtain the dragonification fruit. The world was shaken. Was Demon King Chu going to defy the heavens? Everyone was deeply shocked. As for the goddesses and saint children on the famed mountains and star passages, they were all lost in thought and didn't speak for a long time. Chun Sheng was letting out a long howl from a broken ship on the ocean surface outside of Penglai. He was full of sullenness and unwillingness. He had become a complete joke in today's matter. Needless to say, he would become the butt of everyone's jokes. He wasn't the main character in this matter and wasn't as miserable as Wind Feathers. However, he wasn't the least bit inferior in terms of impact. Today, he had left in a threatening manner, but fled in panic after hearing about Chu Feng's terrifying accomplishments. One of his arms had been shot off by that Demon King, forcing him to flee like a stray dog. He believed that in the eyes of others, he only had himself to blame. It was laughable for him to rush to his death. What heaven's chosen? That's just a joke. Our Peng Lai could have killed him as easily as crushing a bug, but we couldn't mobilize experts. Who can tell me how to deal with him now? Chen Sheng roared with an incomparably cold voice. An old man consoled him. Young master, don't be agitated. The world has just recovered and is far from opening the secret realm. Your uncles and those even more ancient seniors can't escape. Naturally, they won't be able to manifest miracles in the world. An old woman also said, in fact, after a period of time, your brothers and sisters might be able to leave the secret realm and avenge you. When he heard about his brothers and sisters, Chen Sheng's expression became even more gloomy. He stroked his broken arm and said, Yin-yang breathing technique. I reverse the yin and yang and cripple myself. But they're better. Each of them is more stable than the other. Even my little brother is much stronger than me. The old man said, Young master, you are too impatient. The yin-yang breathing technique is incomplete. It was once one of the strongest breathing techniques on Earth in the past. You don't have the complete chapter, yet you want to reverse yin and yang life and death. You want to use this to achieve nirvana in hopes of transcending even further. It will definitely be filled with danger. However, you have this kind of spirit. Once you recuperate, your future achievements will be limitless. His arm is broken, and he's already a cripple. What future is there to talk about? Chen Sheng's eyes were filled with malice. Although he said that, he did not feel despair or dejected. The earth is recovering and great medicines will soon appear everywhere. It won't be too difficult to regrow a broken limb. In fact, there are such mutant fruits in the depths of my Peng Lai secret realm. I have an inner demon now. I don't want that Chu Feng to live. I want him to die immediately. I want to dig out all the caves and caves left behind by Peng Lai and kill him immediately with my heavy weapons. Young master, this thing twice. Those places are too dangerous. We might die if we go. I don't care. Kill Chu Feng immediately. Additionally, I feel that his breathing technique is very strange. Perhaps it has a heavenly origin. I must obtain it. From now on, gather information for me and understand all the characteristics of his breathing technique. I want to verify it. Chen Sheng's expression was cold. He felt as if his heart was being chewed on by a ferocious beast. He couldn't wait any longer. While the world was in an uproar and shocked, Chu Feng arrived at Mount Longhu. The ancestral court of Taoism was majestic and majestic. The soil of Mount Longhu was special. It was red in color like rosy red clouds. In ancient times, the entire mountain area was always shrouded in fiery clouds. Rumor had it that it was caused by pill refinement. And in the depths of the mountain, there is a divine city known as the Taoist capital. It was connected to the heavens, and many orthodoxies from the starry skies would come here on a pilgrimage. However, all of this was like a short-lived epiphyllum. It withered in its splendor and passed away prematurely. Arriving at Mount Longhu once again, Chu Feng felt increasingly different. This mountainous region was not as beautiful as Mount Yindang or as magnificent as Mount Huang, but the atmosphere was extraordinary and contained the charm of immortals. Presently, the special energy particles, the immortal mist, were becoming increasingly dense and pervading the mountain. Mount Longhu's terrain was extraordinary. Currently, each peak was shrouded in rosy red clouds and filled with a medicinal fragrance. There were many mountains, but the main peak was the most special. Back when the demoness was born, she had shaken the world and shaken the hearts of everyone in that demon refinement ground. Now, halfway up the main peak was a copper palace. It was supported by copper pillars, built with jade walls, and covered with copper tiles excavated from the ruins of Mount Longhu. It had become the mysterious woman's residence. Halt! A magpie opened its mouth. It stood on a large pine tree outside the copper tile palace and warned. I want to see the master of this place, Chu Feng said. The copper tile palace wasn't small. It could be seen that the mysterious woman didn't want to make things difficult for herself. It should be very comfortable to live here. Now, the mountain was shrouded in a special energy immortal mist, accompanied by raging scarlet clouds. The atmosphere here was extraordinary as if it were the residence of a banished immortal. "The master isn't here," the magpie replied. At this time, another lynx walked out from the pine forest near the copper tile palace. It strode gracefully and examined Chu Feng. After a moment of hesitation, it said, "You're Chu Feng?" The master said that if you came, she could tell you where she went. She went along the star passage to relieve her boredom and visit an old friend. Chu Feng was dumbfounded when he heard this. What kind of situation was this? That person could easily step into the starry sky, running to the universe to relieve boredom. Wasn't this too terrifying? However, he always felt that it was a bit exaggerated. Ever since he saw the demoness, or rather, the goddess, he was always dizzy. She seemed to be especially good at bragging. If she was so capable, why was she locked up on Mount Longhu back then? Although the energy pagoda on the moon said that this woman was extremely talented, it didn't mention her cultivation level. So much so that Chu Feng suspected that this woman wasn't that woman. "Are you sure that's what she said?" At this time, Chu Feng released his spiritual power to suppress the two beast race members. He could see that these two beast race members had just become beast kings. If they were that woman's subordinates, she wouldn't be so particular about taking in a bird and beast at will. "Ah, Demon King Chu, don't kill me!" The magpie cried out in panic. As a native evolved being, it knew that Chu Feng was very afraid of him. Its previous calmness had completely disappeared. The lynx that was striding elegantly also leapt high into the air with a swoosh and scuttled onto the copper tile palace. At first, it was fierce in appearance, but then it trembled with fear. In the end, it completely surrendered and quickly confessed. "The master said that it's fine if I can't trick you," the lynx said guiltily. What was going on? Chu Feng's face was filled with black lines. He felt that there was something fishy going on here. Was that woman really a swindler? "Where did she go?" Chu Feng shouted. "She should be on Earth in search of fortunes," the lynx said in a low voice. It was getting more and more unconfident. "This swindler, she can't be from that family at all, can she? She just happened to know about the past and used all kinds of identities on herself." The more Chu Feng thought about it, the more likely it seemed. If she really was the young miss of a peerless family during Earth's most glorious era, how could she still be so young and cheerful after experiencing life and death? The death of her relatives and the betrayal of her fiancé? Where is she and what is she looking for? Chu Feng asked seriously. The lynx was so frightened that it was on the verge of tears. Its legs were cramping as it spoke rapidly. She might have gone to the home of myriad gods to find the ancestral peach root and pick the immortal peaches. It seems she's trying to save someone buried under Mount Longhu. Chu Feng was alarmed. Was this true? Now it seemed that there was indeed something strange about that woman. There was someone else here waiting for her to save him. Just who was it? He shot a glance at the lynx. It was so easily frightened that it had confessed everything after a little intimidation. That magpie was even worse off. It was trembling uncontrollably and was about to fall from the tree. Doubtlessly, that woman had casually taken in two beasts to guard her home and hadn't trained them at all. The home of myriad gods was located in the depths of Mount Kunlun and was still far from opening. If that woman dared to go there, it meant that she possessed extraordinary strength and was definitely much more powerful than Chu Feng. He pondered for a moment and decided not to follow her. Instead, he waited at Mount Longhu. He was thinking of searching around to see if he could find the person waiting to be saved. Chu Feng waited here for 2 days and searched the mountain continuously. However, he couldn't find any clues about the living corpse. On the contrary, his expression became increasingly solemn. Mount Longhu was even more terrifying than he had imagined. His current attainments in the field of domains had increased explosively, but he still couldn't reach the summit of the main peak. Some distance away, he saw a number of corpses covered in bright red blood. There was also a broken horn dragon at the peak, but he just couldn't get close. Apart from this, he also saw an even more astonishing scene. A hazy, immortal capital was faintly discernible and was reflected in the mountainous terrain. There's really a Taoist capital? Chu Feng was shaken, but he believed that the real place was extremely terrifying. It was fairly far away, and this was only a reflection. At the same time, Chu Feng saw a number of star passages in the depths of Mount Longhu. There were many living beings in the folded spaces, and there was no lack of divine sons among them. He didn't pay them any attention because he wasn't in the mood. Mount Longhu was very peaceful in the following days. The other regions of the earth also gradually calmed down. The storm caused by Chu Feng was still there, but it wasn't as shocking as a few days ago. At this time, an earth-shattering change was taking place in the outer realm. Massive fleets left Neptune and Mars and were approaching the Earth. What was even more terrifying was that in the depths of the starry skies, the aura of terrifying war beasts filled the air. Auspicious light surged and almost suppressed the stars in the sky. A chariot arrived slowly, emitting a boundless and unfathomable might. It caused the starry skies to tremble and the battleships to tremble like rootless duckweed in the vast ocean. Following which, a golden path unfolded from the depths of the starry skies and entered the solar system. A war beast was pulling a chariot. It moved slowly as it stepped on the golden path and emitted a powerful aura. For a moment, the starry skies were eternally silent and the sun and moon dimmed. In outer space, Yang Xian, Qing Lan, and the others were shaken. Then they trembled and spasmed. They couldn't help but want to kowtow as their hair stood on end. Saint is approaching. He wants to attack here. Their teeth were chattering and their voices were trembling. Chapter 442. It was an azure wolf with a robust physique and a wide mouth full of fangs. It trod on the golden path and was pulling a chariot as it approached slowly. It seemed to be moving very slowly, but each step was like an illusion as it disappeared continuously. It approached from countless kilometers away and directly entered the solar system from the depths of the starry skies. The azure wolf was pulling the chariot with a terrifying aura that caused the entire space to tremble. It was filled with boundless and incomparable fluctuations that could shatter one's spirit. The golden path led straight to Earth as the azure wolf pulled the chariot with steady steps. It arrived in an instant as though it had crossed through an ancient time-space tunnel to arrive. Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qing Lan trembled uncontrollably as they knelt down. Facing an expert of this level, it was only right for them to kowtow. Quasi-sage Golden Wolf. After seeing the azure wolf pulling the chariot, Yang Xian immediately knew who had arrived. The quasi-sage of the Sirius Star region had arrived. This was a terrifying werewolf expert who was rumored to have already been titled a quasi-sage despite his young age. A so-called quasi-sage wasn't much different from a true saint. Moreover, if nothing unexpected happened, he was destined to become a saint in the end. A man in his 30s was sitting cross-legged on the chariot. Golden radiance tore through the void as he blinked his eyes. It was extremely terrifying. He had a head full of golden hair that was braided into hundreds of small braids that hung down his chest and back. His entire body was suffused with terrifying energy fluctuations. Around it, there were many golden mushroom clouds that contained radioactive substances. If an ordinary person were to get close, they would be completely destroyed. Greetings, Lord Quasi-Sage. Even though Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qing Lan were from ancient aristocratic families and had true saints in their clans, they still kowtowed and paid their respects while trembling. That was because they had no other choice. The word saint was like the difference between heaven and earth. They weren't on the same level. Relatively speaking, a quasi-sage was like a god to Yang Xian and the others. This was especially true because this quasi-sage had an extremely great background. That was because he wasn't very old and could be considered a heaven-bestowed genius. He was an abnormally young quasi-sage. The chariot was open but not sealed. There was a faint golden luster, but it couldn't compare to the radiance of the quasi-sage golden wolf which caused the starry skies to tremble. At this moment, the golden wolf became the only existence between heaven and earth. His humanoid body sat cross-legged on the carriage. His aura spread far and wide, and golden mushroom clouds filled the air. He seemed to be an eternal existence. Nearby, the battleships that had come to Earth's outer space froze and remained motionless. Back off! At this time, the green wolf pulling the carriage spoke. It told Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan to get up and leave this place. At the same time, this was also said to the beings on the warships. In the blink of an eye, the battleship had gone far away and was no longer lying in space outside of Earth. From the beginning to the end, Jean Lang had been sitting cross-legged on the carriage. He didn't say anything. This was the prestige of a quasi-saint. Not to mention Yang Xian and the others. Even if their ancestors came, as long as the word saint wasn't mentioned, Jean Lang could disregard them. Moreover, no one would dare to find fault with him. For a moment, the place was silent. Yang Xian and the other two were drenched in cold sweat, enduring the trembling of their bodies and the throbbing of their minds. They retreated and stood far enough in space to watch. What's going on? Why is the quasi-saint Jean Lang here? In the extreme distance, Hu Qingsheng was puzzled as she communicated with the other two spiritually. Legend has it that the quasi-saint Jean Lang's opportunity to become a saint was given by the machine race. This allowed him to look down on a part of the starry skies at such a young age. This time, he's most likely here to return a favor to the machine race. Qinglan pondered for a long time before recalling this rumor that wasn't very widespread. The three had been outside of Earth for a long time and had long since noticed the mechanical army lingering here. They had stopped at Pluto, Mars, and other places. Naturally, they knew that they were plotting something big. Comparatively speaking, the machine race has always been striving to use science to analyze evolution. Although they still can't understand the transformation process of a saint or the process of a supreme divine weapon giving birth to the strongest will, this doesn't hinder them from walking further and further down this path, especially since they've obtained certain results in analyzing domains. I guess they want to break Earth's domains and descend as a whole. But they're not at ease, so they invited the quasi-saint Jean Lang. They made this guess. From the beginning to the end, the quasi-saint Jean Lang in outer space was silent. The tranquility was broken only when he suddenly raised his head and looked down at the starry skies and erupted with fluctuations that shook the entire area. The recovery of this abandoned land is too slow. I've come to help the machine race in order to break the balance and change the wasteland. This will allow the saint children and goddesses to descend as soon as possible. This cold and emotionless voice reverberated under the starry skies as though it was ringing through the ages. Doubtlessly, he wasn't speaking without thinking. It was as though he was explaining something to some existences in the unseen world. At this moment, Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan's spirits were almost about to collapse. Their souls were almost dead, and their vital signs almost stopped operating. That was because there were ineffable fluctuations behind them. There was indeed a certain existence paying attention to this place. The moment they turned back after recovering, they could vaguely see an eye larger than a planet gradually closing in the distance. The three were horrified. At this time, a beast skin scroll flew out from the largest battleship in the machine army. That was the result of many days of analysis. Now, they solemnly offered it to the quasi-saint Jean Lang with reverence so that he could take action. With a wave of the quasi-saint Jean Lang's hand, the beast skin scroll flew over from tens of thousands of kilometers away and landed in his hands. The other party had analyzed it scientifically, but had recorded it in his favorite serious language as a sign of respect. In the blink of an eye, the beast skin scroll turned to ashes. The golden wolf closed his eyes and nodded. Boom! The next moment, he began to attack. He searched for weaknesses according to the machine race's analysis. A pale golden palm rose up and slapped toward certain special locations on Earth. At this moment, the scene was terrifying. That palm blotted out the sky and the sun. It was vast and boundless, almost covering certain regions of Earth. On the ground, countless people were trembling with an indescribable palpitation. Were it not for the domains on Earth, it would have been a great calamity. All life would be plunged into misery and suffering and nothing would be left. On Mount Longhu, Chu Feng suddenly looked up. He sensed the drastic changes in the sky, and his heart palpitated. He felt as though the sky was about to collapse, and the end of the world had arrived. The quasi-Saint Jinlang's methods were too extraordinary. He was attacking a special node on Earth, and the destructive power was unimaginable. A normal planet would have long since disintegrated, but Earth was too mysterious. The domains overlapped, and layer after layer of light soared up. The boundless runes were densely covered and illuminated the starry skies. The people on the ground were palpitating and terrified, but they simply didn't know what was happening. They didn't understand the dangers of the outer realms and the imminent world-destroying crisis. Bang, bang, bang in the void outside Earth. Golden mushroom clouds blossomed one after another. Each one was as vast as the ocean. Unfortunately, none of the equipment on Earth, including the space probes, could capture them. It was as though they were in two different space-time. Indeed, the quasi-Saint Golden Wolf was attacking an ineffable dimensional space on Earth. He wanted to tear apart the domains and attack from the weak points of the analysis. In the distance, Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qing Lan opened their eyes wide in astonishment. Their bodies and souls were trembling, and so were their chariots and mounts. They were paralyzed in the distant void and were ineffably shaken as they stared fixedly at everything. How is this possible? The machine race's analysis has actually reached such a level? Can a quasi-Saint Golden Wolf really break through Earth's supreme domains? Impossible. Even saints don't dare act rashly. There have been cases of saints dying before. Regardless of whether they accepted it or not, the quasi-Saint Golden Wolf's large golden hand broke through a layer of domains and stretched into that ineffable space. He was going even deeper. At this moment, Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qing Lan were ineffably shaken. But it was also at this time that a beam of divine radiance flew out from that special domain on Earth. It streaked across the sky like a holy sword and split open the outer realms. The Golden Wolf decisively retreated and left his chariot. During this process, he stretched out a hand and grabbed his mount, the Green Wolf. Bang! The quasi-Saint's chariot exploded. This kind of mount contained extremely terrifying energy substances. Once it wreaked havoc, it could tear apart the starry skies and create all kinds of wormholes. However, the chariot had just exploded when it was struck once again by that holy sword-like beam of light flying out from Earth. It was completely annihilated and faded away. Upon closer inspection, the quasi-Saint Golden Wolf's right wrist was dripping with golden blood. It had pierced through the void. He had been injured during the attack just now, and his wrist had almost been cut off. This is a quasi-saint we're talking about. He can easily annihilate billions of creatures and can swallow the sun and moon with his mouth. Yet he's actually injured here. Yang Xian's heart trembled. This kind of existence could be said to be invincible and immortal for thousands of eras. At this level, it was very difficult to be injured again and almost never bleed. But he felt relieved after remembering that this was Earth. The machine race's analysis is still unsuccessful. This planet can't be broken. The legend of a saint's death isn't just a rumor. Qing Lan whispered. Hu Qingsheng felt her scalp go numb. The analysis has a certain effect. Moreover, it's not as simple as the quasi-Saint Golden Wolf. There's a great storm this time. She had just finished speaking when a gigantic planet-sized eye opened in the depths of the starry skies. It froze the three's thoughts and made their spirits explode. Soon afterward, a vicious bird flew over. It was scarlet like blood and extremely large. Carrying the aura of a saint, it crossed the starry skies and rushed over. This was a vermilion bird. Its entire body was blood red, and it was strong and powerful. It tore through the void at an incomprehensible speed as it entered the solar system from the outer realms and closed in on Earth. The vermilion bird was a divine bird and should have been surging with auspicious qi. But now, it was suffused with a vicious aura and overflowing ferocity. At this moment, its size was astonishing. It was unknown whether this was its true form after appearing, but it was almost half the size of Earth and shook the solar system. Quasi-saint, Nining Sparrow. Qinglong drew in a breath of cold air. He didn't dare open his mouth and only dared to communicate with the other two through his spirit. They couldn't believe that another quasi-saint had come to attack Earth. Nining Sparrow. I think he was a member of the Heavenly Knights back then. He became sworn brothers with someone and was ranked 9th. He was originally a Een Sparrow, but after killing countless people, he advanced triumphantly and evolved the bloodline of the sacred vermilion bird. The three trembled. Last time, Chu Feng had asked the three about the Heavenly Knights when he came out from the secret lunar realm. Unexpectedly, he stumped them because their knowledge was limited. Later on, after the solar system was covered by the interstellar network, they quickly looked it up and understood enough of the past. Back then, the Heavenly Knights weren't considered the main force, but there were some ruthless characters who hunted down the so-called rebels. Be it old women or infants, they wouldn't let them go. Their methods were ruthless and merciless. They were known as the Executioner Corps. It's reported that among the Heavenly Knights, Yuan Changkong has already become a saint, and the Nining Sparrow has long since become a quasi-saint. It'll eventually become a saint in the future. A corps that couldn't be considered the main force had actually produced 2 saints. This was absolutely a miracle and could be considered an incomprehensible legend. Now, the Heavenly Knights who had conquered Earth in the past, the outstanding executioner, the Nining Sparrow, had come again after a long time. Something big is about to happen. Quasi-saints usually don't appear so easily. Today, 2 have come at once. This is most likely a sign. Could it be that there's going to be an even more terrifying wave? The 3 spirits were unstable. They retreated continuously, wishing they could leave the solar system. At this time, the Nining Sparrow attacked. This was a vermilion bird with boundless hostility. Its entire body was blood red, as though it had flown out from a sea of blood. It looked as though it was half the size of Earth. At this moment, it opened its mouth and spat out boundless flames, directly drowning the Earth. One had to know that this was a quasi-saint. A casual attack could destroy a vital planet and tear apart the starry skies. Now, that it was going all out, it was too terrifying. Chapter 443. In the cold, starry sky, a dazzling flame soared and engulfed a planet. The solar system trembled as a result. The quasi-sage Een Sparrow had gone mad and was about to destroy a vital planet. The flames it spat out were bright red and boundless. This was an unforeseen event that Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglong had witnessed with their own eyes. They were indescribably shaken as they endured such a great pressure that even their souls were about to collapse. They used the wormhole technology to retreat to the edge of the solar system. Even so, their entire bodies were drenched in cold sweat and trembling uncontrollably. That blood-red, vicious bird that was half the size of the Earth was too tyrannical and terrifying. The Nining Sparrow's entire body was covered in terrifying runes. Red mushroom clouds rose up continuously and then formed one energy vortex after another. It was enough to devour planets. At this moment, its ferocious might wreaked havoc and engulfed the starry sky, simply about to break through the 9 heavens. At this moment, all the creatures on Earth couldn't help but raise their heads because that aura was too shocking. It was as if a huge mountain was pressing down on their hearts, causing them to suffocate. There were even some old and frail people who suddenly fell ill. Heavens, what is that? Someone's voice trembled. Many people almost collapsed to the ground the moment they raised their heads, their bodies shivering. The sky was scarlet red, and the sun, moon, and stars couldn't be seen. There was only a sea of red light that drowned out the sky and enveloped the Earth, carrying with it a strong, baleful aura and killing intent. At this moment, ordinary people could see that the outside of Earth seemed to have been dyed red with blood. The scene was extremely tragic and horrifying. It was no longer as unconscious as before. Now, Everyone could see the majestic scene outside the Earth. The only fortunate thing was that the space outside Earth was densely covered with domain runes. They interweaved together to form a giant swamp, which transformed into a whirlpool and blocked the scarlet flames. Otherwise, any other planet would have been destroyed long ago. The nighting sparrow let out a low howl and flapped its wings. Bloody light pierced through the solar system in the blink of an eye. This kind of force could easily tear apart a planet. However, it wouldn't work here. The Earth was tough and unshakable. The nighting sparrow activated its secret technique, and the baleful aura on its enormous body grew increasingly intense. It spat out a sea of flames as it opened its mouth and covered the Earth once more. If this scene were spread out, it would definitely shake the entire starry sky. The quasi-sage was making a move. Moreover, such madness was too rarely seen. Such a ferocious attack could easily destroy a source of life. Boom! Earth was shrouded in a bloody light. Just as it was engulfed by the raging flames to an astonishing degree, the planet finally exploded. It was like a sea of blood rolling in reverse, like a vast ocean of magma surging into the sky. All of the red flames spewed out by the nighting sparrow began to spin in reverse. Moreover, in the blink of an eye, it had transformed into a scarlet vermilion bird that was a third the size of the Earth. This was exactly the same as the nighting sparrow. It had a blood-red body and a terrifying face. It looked like a vermilion bird, a legendary, auspicious bird. However, it was even more ferocious and incomparably malevolent than the other evil birds. Flawless mirror image domain. The quasi-sage golden wolf was startled, and his heart went cold. He decisively retreated and left the outer space. This was a vermilion bird, no different from the nighting sparrow. It let out a long cry and emitted a bitter, killing intent that shook the starry skies. Its saintly might suffused the air and swept in all directions. It could be seen that the nearby meteorites were silently annihilated and instantly exploded. It was because the two tyrannical vermilion birds threw themselves at each other. Both of them were the size of a small half of the Earth. They fought intensely, directly fighting a bloody battle. At first, the nighting sparrow didn't want to fight. This was a mirror image projection of the Earth's mysterious domain. This kind of confrontation was very bad for it. The flawless mirror image domain was too tyrannical. It immediately locked onto the nighting sparrow and fought against it. It couldn't break free because there was a certain time limit. The Sage Master's methods are all-knowing. Outside the solar system, Yangxian's face was pale as he spoke thus. Apart from existences of that level, who else could create such a terrifying domain and force the quasi-sage to fight against it? Bang, bang, bang. In the end, the other vermilion bird disappeared. Meanwhile, the nighting sparrow was drenched in blood and its feathers were withered. It was incomparably ferocious as it stopped in the distance. If it wasn't for the entire solar system being covered by domains, the consequences would be unimaginable. There had even been a collision between quasi-sages. The nighting sparrow's expression was cold, although it was currently in the form of a bird. Its face was showing signs of transforming into a human face. Its eyes were increasingly fierce, and its blood-red body emitted killing intent that shook the starry skies. At this time, the people on Earth were deathly pale. They felt exceptional despair and fear because the domains were no longer blocking their line of sight. Such a large vermilion bird was emitting flames all over its body. It was 1/3 the size of the Earth and hovered in the air. It was even more terrifying than a demonic god. It had surpassed legends. What kind of scene was this? Many people fell limp to the ground on the spot. They couldn't stand this kind of fright. Chu Feng's heart was pounding. He stood on Mount Longhu and gazed at the outer realms. He simply couldn't believe that such a large vermilion bird was hovering in the air with flames engulfing the starry skies. It was on the same level as a celestial body, and its entire body was blazing brilliantly. It was truly heaven-defying. Is this a demonic sage? He stared at the firmament and was momentarily lost in thought. He felt that the road ahead would be difficult. Once he stepped out from Earth, he would have to face unimaginable creatures. The whole world was shocked. Presently, Earth was in a state of panic as though the end of the world had arrived. Outside the Earth, the nine-inch sparrow was still silent. It opened its mouth and spat out a black stone, using it to suppress its sigh. In the blink of an eye, the black stone turned into a giant tablet that could reach the heavens. It was as tall as the nine-inch sparrow and had turned into a tablet. It looked like a tombstone, black as ink and engraved with many words. Are you going to destroy the tombstones of the ancient saints on this planet? The nine-inch sparrow finally spoke. Its voice was cold and emotionless, as though it had come from the depths of hell. The next moment, it moved. Its wings flapped continuously as though it was brandishing a pair of blood-red swords. It was terrifying and intimidating. Even the quasi-sage golden wolf's pupils constricted. He had once heard that the nine-inch sparrow possessed the 9 slashes. It was a secret art he had been perfecting as a heavenly knight. In the past, I killed countless rebels. Today, I've come again. The nine-inch sparrow spoke coldly. Boom! The sky fell and the earth cracked. Ghosts and gods wept and howled as the nine-inch sparrow rose in revolt. It flapped its wings and unleashed the 9 slashes. The scarlet blood-red sword slashed out horizontally and interweaved with terrifying quasi-sage divine might. It was about to slash apart Earth's domains. As expected, Earth calmed down because that saint's tombstone had caused the domains to become silent. Apparently, the black stone tablet was the tombstone of an extremely important character on this planet. It had obtained the recognition of Earth's consciousness. Kill! The nine-inch sparrow let out a low roar. Its eyes were blazing and becoming increasingly fanatical. It wanted to destroy this planet and take away a certain legendary item. Back then, it had missed this opportunity. Boom! Every strike was accompanied by a scarlet vermilion birdwing. It was as though the demonic sword of hell had awakened and was charging out in defiance of the heavens to tear the world apart. The nine-inch sparrow had always been evolving into a vermilion bird, but had never been an auspicious bird. It was more ferocious and terrifying than any other bird. The 9 consecutive slashes were enough to destroy one planet after another. However, the celestial body in front of it had withstood all of them. Blazing light flared up like 9 stars exploding. At the edge of the solar system, Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglan saw everything clearly with the help of the Dao fruit crystal. They were indescribably shaken. The destruction of a planet with the help of a quasi-sage. How terrifying! But this place is very special. A sage master has been born before. Isn't the quasi-sage afraid of dying? The next moment, Earth recovered and no longer remained silent. Even a recognized saint's tombstone wasn't enough. It had erupted. Chi! The black tombstone was immediately shattered, following which the domain runes transformed into a field of red spider lilies, which blossomed in outer space. They were mysterious and frightening. Boom! 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 The extraterrestrial red spider lilies formed a winding river which flowed toward the nine-inch sparrow. It was like a river of death flowing from the other shore to take away the nine-inch sparrow's life. Kill! The nine-inch sparrow shouted. Divine radiance crisscrossed the area. Its feathers were glowing with sword chi, which pierced through the heaven and earth. Scarlet sword radiance enveloped the firmament and submerged the earth once again. But no matter how powerful it was still inferior. The blue-red spider lilies took root in the void as they bloomed. They swayed with terrifying energy in the eerie blue. At the same time, the river of death transformed into runes which floated up and surrounded the nine-inch sparrow. There was no distance it couldn't cover. Boom! The domain runes were too brilliant. The long river and the red spider lilies were all manifestations of the runes. Now they bloomed and activated. The terrifying earth revealed its astonishing side. Ah, the nine-inch sparrow roared. It was easy to imagine how serious the situation was to make a quasi-sage lose his composure. In the end, the entire area was drowned in blue light. The scarlet vermilion bird was torn apart, and its feathers were stained with blood as it withered away. A sage has fallen. This happened again? Qinglan's face was pale as he cried out in alarm. His body was convulsing. Blood splattered in all directions. That was a quasi-sage being dismembered. The outside world would find it hard to believe if news of this were spread. A quasi-sage was glorious even in death. Energy flowers bloomed, golden lotuses grew in the void, and sweet springs surged everywhere. But now it was being dismembered and drenched in blood. In the end, the place became silent. Only a few blood-colored feathers danced in the air as the giant vermilion bird disappeared. Only after a long while did a cold, emotionless, and almost cruel voice break the deathly silence. "I'm undying." The rain of blood and feathers condensed as the nine-inch sparrow appeared once again. A mysterious object shattered and, just like it, disappeared in the air. A divine object that can die in place of a quasi-sage. This kind of thing is priceless. Even the old saints who survived from ancient times might not have it. Who would be willing to use it? Yet, Hu Qingsheng was shaken and full of puzzlement. A divine object that could die in place of a quasi-sage was unimaginably precious. It could even help a vigorous old saint block a fatal blow. It was simply too rare. The nine-inch sparrow actually dared to squander it like this? How could it be willing? From an outsider's point of view, this was a waste. It was simply incomprehensible for a place where saints could fall. This is a great storm. Someone wants to borrow the nine-inch sparrow's hand to probe the situation on Earth. Perhaps they'll attack. Qinglan said. The three suddenly turned back and gazed into the depths of the cosmos. In the cold, starry skies, a pair of giant eyes was slowly closing. It was too terrifying and surpassed the surrounding celestial bodies. It made one's soul freeze and their vital signs temporarily disappear. "What happened just now?" Yang Xian cried out. After coming to, his whole body was drenched in sweat. Is this the reason why the quasi-sage nine-inch sparrow is so fearless? Qinglan was shocked. He had a premonition that a single mishap would cause an inestimably terrifying incident to erupt here. "I'll take this opportunity to reverse life and death and seize the opportunity to become a saint." The nine-inch sparrow's eyes were blazing with cold intent. It was truly fearless because the second mysterious object beside it had shattered. Its blood and feathers condensed once again, and it had once again returned to its peak state. This was an astonishing squandering. The second heaven-defying divine object had been destroyed here. "Come, help me become a saint." The nine-inch sparrow shouted loudly. His eyes were scarlet red and filled with surging battle intent. "I've once conquered this planet and killed countless rebels. What I lacked in the past, I'll make up for it today and seize its fortune. Kill." It was rare for a quasi-sage to be so hysterical. It was going berserk and erupted with boundless bloody light, driving a sea of flames to attack the earth. At this time, countless scenes appeared around it. All of them were scenes of slaughter from the past. At that time, it was just an ordinary heavenly night and far from a quasi-sage. However, it was sufficiently cold-blooded and exceptionally cruel. It had killed countless people. Following its rise, the slaughter became even more intense. It advanced on heroic spirits, leaving behind countless corpses and rivers of blood. The strange scenes became increasingly astonishing. One by one, they were all scenes of the past. A white-clothed young lady was in her pure and brilliant years, but she was heartbroken as she hugged her younger brother, who was lying in a pool of blood. The nine-inch sparrow of that era wore a cruel smile as it transformed into a human form. With a swing of its sword, it sent the young lady's head flying. It advanced in large strides and killed all who stood in its way. An old man with turbid eyes begged for his grandson to be spared. In the end, the nine-inch sparrow directly clawed open the top of his skull. The old man's eyes immediately dimmed. Before death, he lay on his young grandson's body, hoping to protect him. However, both grandfather and grandson were still killed. There were too many such scenes around the Nine-Inch Sparrow. All of them were scenes of slaughter. He stepped over countless corpses and treaded through rivers of blood. His expression was callous and his character cruel. Later on, he rose to power. After a long period of time, the era of conquering Earth had long since ended. He was about to become a quasi-sage, but when he discovered a so-called descendant of rebels on a small planet, he still revealed his true form and destroyed that source of life. At this time, many evolvers on Earth saw these scenes of the past. Because the Nine-Inch Sparrow was too resplendent and surpassed the sun, the scenes it projected were terrifying. It wanted to become a sage and no longer hid its past. On the ground, many people trembled in shock. Then, they were filled with boundless fear. This was simply a demon without any humanity to speak of. He really deserves to be killed. On Mount Longhu, Chu Feng clenched his fists and gazed at the firmament. Even his eyes were suffused with a faint red color. He hated this Nine-Inch Sparrow to the extreme. He had been to the moon and witnessed the process of those heavenly knights hunting down the forebears. It was a cold-blooded and cruel experience. Now that he was witnessing these scenes, it was as if he had experienced it all again. The Nine-Inch Sparrow became sworn brothers with Yuan Chengkong and the other heavenly knights. All this time, he had been chasing and killing the so-called rebels in order to obtain some kind of fortune. Among them, he and Yuan Chengkong had the greatest achievements. At this time, he spread his wings and was laughing loudly with overflowing ferocity. Back then, even the 11th ranked planet was breached, not to mention now. The saying that the Sage Master is not dead and will return is but a lie. Do you really think you can deceive the ages? Today I've come again. I've killed countless rebels here. Now, I've breached this planet and perfected my fortune from the past. I'll become a sage here. The Nine-Inch Sparrow was cold and became increasingly frenzied. He was fearless even though he had been killed twice. That was because he had several divine death scapegoats on him. Oh, I can feel it. Reversing life and death. I can really become a sage here. Something terrifying happened. After the third reversal, his aura underwent an astonishing change. He was going to use the divine scapegoats to defy the heavens and become a sage here. On the ground, many evolvers were shocked. This demon-like existence was actually going to break through and become a demonic sage here. Was there any justice left in this world? An inhumane executioner whose hands were stained with blood had slaughtered countless forebears here. Now, he was going to achieve his peerless Tao fruit here. How could the forebears rest in peace? He was tearing open the bloody wounds in many people's hearts. To someone like Chu Feng, this was simply unacceptable. His blood was boiling with anger. This was simply unfair. Anyone could become a sage, but why did it have to be him? He was going to rise up here. Success. I'm finally going to become a sage. This planet is indeed my land of fortune. Back then, it helped me achieve my goal. Today, it's going to help me take that step. The Nine-Inch Sparrow was laughing in an incomparably carefree manner. But in the eyes of others, it was cold-blooded and sinister. He was actually going to succeed perfectly. Who can kill him? How can we let him become a sage? People like Chu Feng couldn't take it anymore. His body was trembling from anger. He felt that this was unfairness and was grieving for the forebears. That moment is coming. The Nine-Inch Sparrow laughed loudly. He shot a glance at the earth and said, "What sage master? He's long since exiled himself to the edge of the universe and died in a bronze coffin. He'll never appear again. Today, I'm going to defy the heavens and become a sage in his homeland. In the future, I'll kill all the rebels here. What can he do to me? This can also be considered revenge for my mysterious ancestor." There was once a major character from his bloodline who was killed by the Sage Master with a raise of his hand. At this time, many people on Earth felt their bodies go cold. Even though they didn't understand the past, they could understand many things from the images around the Nine-Inch Sparrow and its words. How could such a person become a sage? Everyone sighed in their hearts and roared in anger. Their eyes were about to split open because they didn't want to see that result. The Nine-Inch Sparrow laughed loudly. Specks of holy light began to suffuse its body. It was about to succeed. At this time, a mysterious aura rose up from the earth, and the domains underwent new changes. The nining sparrow had been killed for the third time, but in the end, it came back to life, and this kind of fluctuation appeared. With a buzz, expanse after expanse of radiance illuminated the earth. The domains laid down by the Sage Master in the past appeared. At the same time, an object on Chu Feng's body flew away soundlessly. This startled him as he watched it disappear into the firmament. That was a silver piece of paper blooming with resplendent light. Just as the nining sparrow was about to become a sage, the domains laid down by the Sage Master appeared vigorously outside the earth. A silver heavenly tome soared into the air, and a figure emerged. It was a man with silver hair draped over his shoulders. His face was incomparably handsome, and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. He stared coldly at the nining sparrow. "You Sage Master." As a quasi-sage, the powerful nining sparrow was on the verge of transforming into a sage. But now it was trembling, and its voice was trembling. It couldn't help but cry out. Even the holy light that had just condensed on its body dispersed a portion. Chapter 444. The nining sparrow's scarlet feathers stood on end. Its pupils constricted as it retreated involuntarily. The holy light on its body dimmed. It was indeed quite shocked. That wasn't his true body. It was sure that the sacred expert didn't personally come. So how could he do anything to it? However, the nining sparrow's heart was still restless. It wanted nothing more than to turn around and leave, but it couldn't. It was holding on forcefully. As a quasi-sage, and one that was on the verge of becoming a sage, how could it be willing to give up? Even though the nining sparrow was naturally cruel and had killed countless people, its emotions were complicated at the moment. It was even incomparably apprehensive. That was a legendary Sage Master. Back then, when this silver-haired man brandished the star-studded whip, the starry sky truly collapsed and the universe dimmed. Clan leaders fell one after another, and to this day, when the various clans mentioned him, their expressions would change. This was a godlike man. In the past, the terrifying power that erupted at the final moments of his life had shaken the entire starry sky, leaving behind an endless, glorious legend. "I want to become a sage." The nining sparrow roared in its heart. At this moment, it couldn't shrink back. It had to go against the heavens. Buzz. The silver-haired man stood within the domain with countless runes around him. With a lift of his hand, a beam of light flew out and shattered the nining sparrow with a bang. How is this possible? The nining sparrow howled in anger. It was too unwilling to accept this outcome. It was condensing holy light and was about to succeed, but in the end, that person destroyed its hopes with a casual strike. In the blink of an eye, the nining sparrow had disintegrated. At the edge of the solar system, Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglan were all petrified. What had they seen? Was it really that person? Sacred Master. On the ground, countless people cheered, their hearts filled with excitement and joy. Even if they didn't know who this so-called sacred expert was, the people on the ground were still incomparably excited, their emotions rising and falling intensely. It was because that blood-red vermilion bird wasn't a benevolent type. Just now, it was domineering and domineering, already revealing some of the past secrets. This was a bloody and cruel executioner. Back then, it was the invader, and now it came again. It even wanted to kill all of the so-called traitor's descendants. It was savage, domineering, and abnormally hateful. In outer space, the nining sparrow was howling with boundless fury. The holy light on its body had been scattered, and all its previous efforts had been wasted. It had transformed into a rain of blood and feathers. It was too scary just now. It couldn't dodge in time. That wasn't the Sage Master's true body and should only be a wisp of imprint left behind in the past. He was able to kill it in an instant by controlling a special domain on Earth. The nining sparrow's entire body was ice cold. It didn't have many divine death substitution items left on its body. With great difficulty, it condensed blood once more and recovered in an instant. There were only 2 items left. Bang! However, the silver-haired man raised his hand once again above the Earth's domains and hacked forward once more with the power of the domain. In the blink of an eye, the 9-inch sparrow exploded. Blood dripped down and feathers fell. In an instant, it was killed twice in a row, and not a single bit of the condensed holy light was left. Well done. Kill him until his body and soul are completely destroyed. Chu Feng shouted excitedly on Mount Longhu. His heart was filled with joy. Not long ago, he saw the 9-inch sparrow being so ostentatious and tyrannical. It actually wanted to become a saint outside of Earth. This caused Chu Feng's chest to burn with rage and his lungs to be filled with resentment. It couldn't be rushed out, and his entire person was about to explode. Now, he had personally witnessed the 9-inch sparrow's physical body being disintegrated twice by the silver-haired man. Naturally, he was happy and his blood was boiling. Back then, the executioner had humiliated the earth and was still vainly dreaming of becoming a saint. There was no way. In reality, there were many people cheering on the ground. Quite a few people were trembling when they saw this scene. They were so excited that they cried out loudly. The 9-inch sparrow had come to become a saint. Moreover, it had made a deal with the beings in the depths of the starry skies. That was why it was willing to take the risk and attack. Otherwise, how could it have so many divine death substitution items on its body? Even an old peerless saint wouldn't be able to obtain a single one. Before long, the blood condensed and the 9-inch sparrow reappeared. Now, it only had one divine death substitution item on its body. The 9-inch sparrow was still half the size of the earth. Its expression was sinister and its eyes were sinister. Its evil intent surged to the heavens as it said, "I want to become a saint. Even if the Sage Master comes in person, I will still achieve a peerless Tao fruit." After reversing life and death in succession, the 9-inch sparrow gathered once more and was even more intense than before. This shocked even the bird itself. It had advanced one step further and was only a hair away from becoming a saint. My opportunity to become a saint has indeed fallen on this planet. The 9-inch sparrow was pleasantly surprised. It had been destined since many years ago. There were too many things to pay attention to in order to become a saint. It had killed the earth's forebears and condensed their fortunes. It had long since decided to become a saint here. If it were to succeed, those deceased forebears would never be able to rest in peace. At this time, the imposing figure in the Earth's domain didn't move. He was looking down at the scarlet bird. Who would have thought that after being annihilated twice by the Sage Master, the reversal of life and death would advance one step further? I'm only a hair away from becoming a saint. The 9-inch sparrow laughed loudly like rolling thunder. At the same time, it realized that it was no longer afraid, even if the silver-haired man were to use the domain to blast its body apart. That was because it would be reborn if it were to reverse life and death once more. One had to know that the holy light around its body was so dense that it was only a hair away from becoming a saint. "Come!" the 9-inch sparrow shouted. It was very excited. If it could become a saint under the tempering of the Sage Master, it would become a legend and forge a supreme reputation. On the ground, people were astonished. How could this scarlet bird be so terrifying? It couldn't be killed. "Come, I'll be annihilated once more and be reborn one last time. I'll be a demonic sage." The 9-inch sparrow laughed loudly. It only had one last divine item to replace its death. It firmly believed that it would succeed. The Sage Master's silver hair danced in the wind. His face was handsome, and his eyes were as deep as the ocean. He didn't activate the domain again, and only gazed at the vermilion bird in front of him. The 9-inch sparrow was terrified. Its heart was filled with intense uneasiness and actually emitted wisps of cold air. To it, the quiet Sage Master's phantom was even more terrifying than when he attacked. It was unpredictable. "What are you afraid of? Saint Realm, come." In the end, it roared furiously. In the past, the 9-inch sparrow was still a small knight who didn't even have the qualifications to look up to the Sage Master. Now, It dared to fight with all its might. What was the big deal? As a ruthless character, it adjusted its mood quite well. Stop it. We can't let it become a saint. On the ground, countless people were praying for the nine-inch sparrow to succeed. That kind of thing couldn't be tolerated. Clang! Finally, the silver-haired sage master moved. With a lift of his hand, a silver light flew out. That was the domain heavenly book, a silver sheet of paper. In truth, it wasn't paper. It was a type of extremely rare material. Now, the silver light pierced through the sky and illuminated the outer space. It was even more dazzling than peerless lightning. The nine-inch sparrow was frightened. It resisted with all its might and condensed holy light. It wanted nothing more than to become a saint immediately because it felt a great danger. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Chi! This time it didn't explode. Instead, it was cut open by the silver heavenly book and didn't fall into pieces. The nine-inch sparrow let out a mournful cry. Its eyes were filled with extreme resentment. One could imagine how important this matter was to make a quasi-sage lose his composure like this. My opportunity to become a saint, it roared furiously. That mysterious opportunity to become a saint had disappeared. It had been destroyed. What was that? A single heavenly book and a single silver sheet had struck it down from heaven to hell. This made it go mad with hatred. At this point, the nine-inch sparrow's desire to become a saint had been shattered. Its Tao foundation had been destroyed. The matter wasn't over yet. The silver domain heavenly book flipped over and flew over once again. With dazzling silver light, it hacked toward the giant red bird. Puffed. Blood splashed out. The nine-inch sparrow was shocked. Its entire body convulsed, and its mournful cries became even more terrifying. It couldn't evade just now. Its quasi-sage foundation had been destroyed. The nine-inch sparrow trembled in fear. Its physical body was still there and could be maintained, but something was missing inside. Its quasi-sage foundation was broken and it had been crippled. I don't believe it. A quasi-sage has fallen. It roared in pain. It had always been the one killing others and was stained with the blood of the forebears. Today, it had actually suffered a calamity. Did you guys see that? The legendary event has happened. A quasi-sage has lost his Tao position. That's right, this is a shocking event. A saint has been beheaded. At the edge of the solar system, Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglan were dumbfounded. The nine-inch sparrow didn't die, but it felt that its cultivation had been crippled. In terms of sharp decline, it should be declining rapidly. Impossible. I want to illuminate the heavens and become a giant. How can this be? Well, I have to start all over again. The nine-inch sparrow was about to go crazy. This was even more unbearable than death. Sage Master, are you a human or a ghost? How can you do this? Its eyes were blood red, and its body was shrinking as it stared at the silver-haired man in the Earth's domain. Sage Master, peerless style. In the distance, Yang Xian and Qinglan were communicating telepathically. They didn't dare speak out for fear that the nine-inch sparrow would flip out and retaliate. On the ground, the people knew what had happened. They were all dumbfounded and incomparably shocked. Then they began to boil over. A terrifying bird filled with hostility had once conquered Earth. Now, it was coming to destroy all life here and even vainly hoped to become a saint. Now, it had been crippled. The people were incomparably excited and delighted. Good crippling. On Mount Longhu, Chu Feng shouted at the firmament. Old fellow among the heavenly knights, you bloody criminal, come again if you have guts. Go to the star passages. I'll wait for you on Earth. The nine-inch sparrow hadn't completely fallen to the bottom of the valley. It was still emitting an astonishing suppressive might. Its eyes were comparable to the heavenly eye as it looked down on the entire Earth and roared repeatedly, following which it shrank rapidly. I'm unresigned. Even if I have to start all over again, I'll become a quasi-sage and break through the saint barrier. It was hysterical as it let out a long howl and swore. Chu Feng said suspiciously, "This old fellow's fighting spirit is quite high. Don't tell me he really wants to take the star passages and return to Earth to start all over again. Take me away." When a nine-inch sparrow had shrunk to a length of 300 meters, it was incomparably weak. It rushed towards the quasi-sage golden wolf in the distance and asked for his help. The quasi-sage golden wolf was now relatively close to the moon. In the end, he took a step forward and wanted to bring the nine-inch sparrow away. Boom! However, he had just moved when a beam of light flew over from the moon and struck his body. This caused the golden wolf to stagger and fly out horizontally, following which he revealed his true form. Chapter 445. Outside of Earth, a giant golden wolf was roaring. It was large and drenched in blood as it floated in the gloomy space. It was simply a reappearance of a legend. The quasi-sage golden wolf let out a long howl after losing half of its body. It simply couldn't believe that a beam of light from the moon had almost killed it. It had actually suffered such grave injuries. At this time, the nine-inch sparrow's entire body was ice cold. Its body had shrunk to only 300 meters in length, and it had never been so weak before. It realized that the golden wolf's injuries were caused by the Sage Master because the moon was the Sage Master's residence back in the day. There were offensive domains there that weren't any weaker than those on Earth. People on Earth were shaken. Today, everyone's nerves had been tormented until they were about to break. The half-body of the quasi-sage golden wolf was also quite large. It was a quarter the size of the Earth and hung in the air. Its golden fur stood erect as it roared at the moon. That was the true heavenly wolf howling at the moon. "Go, let's go," the nine-inch sparrow whispered. It was trembling because its quasi-sage status had been severed. Its life's glory had come to an end. It knew that today's events would shake the starry skies. A legendary matter, like killing a saint, had actually appeared. No matter what, it would cause a great earthquake among all races. The nine-inch sparrow would become the focal point, but it was a failure. It had failed to become a saint, and even had its quasi-sage status severed. It was truly lamentable. Its eyes were sinister as it swore to start all over again. It would become a saint sooner or later and illuminate the heavens. The Earth's domains didn't erupt again, and no more energy beams shot out from the moon. Doubtlessly, these two planets were inclined towards defense. Now that the two quasi-sages had retreated and didn't attack, they were temporarily safe. The quasi-sage golden wolf was extremely cold. Its golden eyes became deep and unfathomable. It felt that it had been wronged. It had just released its terrifying aura to save the nine-inch sparrow when it was attacked. Now that they were injured and the quasi-sage's energy was restrained, they were actually safe. The quasi-sage golden wolf's body shrunk, and its half-body was suffused with blood energy. Its body grew back, and it carried the nine-inch sparrow into the distance. After the green wolf pulling the carriage, it had died just now. It had been struck by the moon's beam and turned into ashes. A golden path appeared as the golden wolf carried the nine-inch sparrow into the distance and left the solar system. It didn't even glance at the metallic battleships. On the ground, many people cheered with incomparable excitement. They didn't know what happened afterwards, but they understood that the blood-red vicious bird was crippled. This was something that anyone could see. Such a huge red raptor was on the same level as a planet. It was too conspicuous in outer space. What happened just now was seen by countless people. This executioner has fallen directly from the quasi-sage realm, and his cultivation has been crippled. He will soon experience endless bitterness and torment. Chu Feng waved his fist forcefully. The nine-inch sparrow's quasi-sage realm had been severed. This couldn't be any better. At the edge of the solar system, Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qing Lan were trembling both physically and mentally. This was actually the result. Two quasi-saints had come with a large force, and one of them had almost become a saint. However, the tables had turned in the end, and they had to leave with their damaged bodies. Killing a saint, this type of thing actually happened. It will make the depths of the starry skies greatly tremble. They sighed, all of them feeling like this was a bit unreal. The three of them gazed at Earth from afar. The domain runes had long since disappeared, and the Sage Master had turned dim. He had turned into a rain of light and disappeared. Shio! A streak of silver light flew into the atmosphere and disappeared in the blink of an eye. That was a silver piece of paper, a page of a heavenly book. Now no aura or gaze could capture it, because it was a domain in itself. This was a peerless divine object with all kinds of domains carved upon it. Who could lock onto it? Chi! With a light sound, the silver paper fell from a certain part of Mount Longhu and pierced into the rocks. Chu Feng's heart was pounding. No one knew better than him what this page of heavenly books signified. It was a peerless inheritance of domains. Even the Sage Master had obtained it by chance and didn't know its origins. Chu Feng put it away, not daring to let others sense it. The outer realms, however, couldn't calm down. When that page of heavenly book disappeared, 3 beams of light rushed in from outside the solar system. All of them were looking down and searching for something. That was because they guessed that it was a divine object left behind by the Sage Master. Domain Heavenly Book. Someone had seen clearly that when the paper cut opened the Nine Sparrow, the domains interweaved and destroyed its quasi-sage foundation. It was definitely an extraordinary and boundlessly terrifying object. Unfortunately, it didn't enter this planet. Another person sighed. I have an urge to enter my incarnation and become a saint child to fight for the fortune. In the end, the 3 beams of light disappeared. Doubtlessly, these weren't their true bodies. They were quasi-sages manifesting themselves and projecting themselves across the boundless distance. It could also be called a manifestation of divinity. Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan saw everything clearly and felt their bodies go cold. There were actually 3 more quasi-sages besides the Golden Wolf and Nine Sparrow. A total of 5 experts had arrived. Any one of them was an expert in the starry skies and could hardly be seen normally. But today, 5 quasi-sages had come. Is it over? Qinglan whispered. He gathered his courage and turned around to gaze into the depths of the starry skies. Perhaps it's over now, Yang Xian whispered. They knew that there was a true saint behind the Nine Sparrow who had even reached the Heaven Illuminator realm. Otherwise, a mere quasi-sage wouldn't be able to obtain so many divine objects for death substitution. Suddenly, in the instant that they turned their heads, they saw a pair of enormous eyes in the starry sky. They were as large as planets, and they slowly opened. It's not over yet. Hu Qingsheng was horrified. There was indeed an unfathomable existence there. The moment it opened its eyes, their thoughts froze and their spirits almost collapsed. This kind of entity was too terrifying. That pair of eyes was suffused with the color of blood. It was like a blood moon dozens of times larger, hanging in the dark sky as it gazed in the direction of Earth. Trembling, and then their bodies went limp. Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan knelt down involuntarily. Their thoughts stopped and their spirits stiffened. Everything was instinctive. That kind of supreme evolved being brought about a supreme suppression. It was unbearable to ordinary entities. If they weren't at the level of a scion and were heaven-bestowed geniuses of their respective planets, their spirits would probably collapse. In the end, that pair of gigantic eyes closed, and the 2 blood moon-like light balls in the depths of the starry skies disappeared. That entity didn't come over, nor did it attack. Oh heavens, it's too terrifying. Which expert is it? With his strength, he must have made his name in the ancient times. His true name has spread throughout the cosmos. They firmly believe that this was an ancient saint at the very least. Did he retreat just like that? He borrowed the quasi-sage Nine Sparrow to probe Earth's situation. Sigh, an entity of that level isn't something we can fathom. While they were discussing, their respective interstellar communication devices suddenly rang. Apparently, something special had happened. Afterward, they hurriedly checked the information and were all dumbfounded, following which they felt a chill run down their spines. The 11th ranked planet back, then, is indeed unfathomable. Some people say they've seen a bronze coffin floating away in the desolate regions of the cosmos. This matter had been exposed not long ago and shook the depths of the starry skies. It made many races restless. Is the Sage Master really not dead yet? Yang Xian and the other two were shaken. Could it be that a wisp of his imprint appeared on Earth just now, and that's why that bronze coffin resonated and reappeared? They couldn't make any guesses and could only let their imaginations run wild. Following which, their communication devices rang out once more. Another major incident had erupted. The moon where the quasi-sage 9 Sparrow resided has been destroyed. This was simply earth-shattering. The 9 Sparrow had just attacked Earth and wanted to unleash a massacre here. But in the end, his old nest was destroyed. Reportedly, the 9 Sparrow resided on the moon outside a certain vital star. It had evolved from an Sparrow, and like the aura of extreme Een, there were many of its descendants there. Now, an entire moon had been smashed by a large hand. Someone witnessed it. It's suspected to be a quasi-sage. Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglan finally understood why that terrifying existence had left. Be it the bronze coffin in the desolate regions, or the mysterious expert who had destroyed the 9 Sparrow's residence. They were all thorns that he wanted to pull out. History is shockingly similar. Back then, many years after the 11th ranked planet had declined, someone wanted to completely destroy Earth. In the end, a bronze coffin appeared, and an expert came into being to attack the race of the attacker. Today, such a thing had happened again. Back then, a number of experts escaped from Earth, but most of them have fallen. At most, only 1 or 2 are left to carry out targeted revenge. They guessed that it couldn't be the Sage Master's reappearance. Even the bronze coffin that was rumored to have reappeared was fake. It was to intimidate them. Some people speculate that among those who escaped from Earth back then, the sages have all perished up until now, and only one quasi-saint is still alive. It's very likely that this is true. It's a little sad. The planet that was once ranked 11th has completely dimmed. While the three were discussing, the 9 Sparrow in the depths of the starry skies was howling in anger. It was simply going crazy. Although it was cold-blooded, the destruction of its own territory and the death of all its disciples made it extremely furious. It had been killing others for so many years, but it had never suffered such a great loss. Today, its quasi-sage realm had been severed, and then the moon it inhabited had been extinguished with a single palm. As it saw it, the bullying had gone too far, and it wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. I want to return to the ancestral planet and recuperate there. It didn't dare go anywhere else. At the same time, a chill ran down its spine. No, I want to take a look at Earth before leaving. The 9 Sparrow asked the quasi-sage Golden Wolf to send it there. That was because it was too unresigned. It even wanted to step onto the star passages and use its crippled body to conquer that planet once more. It wanted to harvest the rebels and condense fortunes. Very well. The quasi-sage Golden Wolf had transformed into a human and had completely recovered. His head was full of golden braids, and his aura was oppressive. He took a step forward onto the golden path, and once again charged into the solar system. "Thou friend, lend me your divine ability," the 9 Sparrow requested. Afterward, its eyes lit up like 2 beams of scarlet light, which illuminated the surface of the Earth. Now, the people on the ground couldn't see it and the Golden Wolf because their bodies had shrunk to 2 meters in length. They were no longer hiding the sky and hiding the sun. At the quasi-sage level, one could still see everything on the ground clearly even without the clairvoyant ability. As long as they didn't attack, the Earth's domains wouldn't backfire. The first place the 9 Sparrow looked at was Mount Zhongnan. That was because the star passages his descendants had taken led to that place. Back then, he had also killed his way out from this place. He rose to power on this planet and killed countless people. He saw a red-haired youth in a folded space behind Mount Zhongnan. He was wild and untamed, and his eyes were cold. He was very much like the 9 Sparrow for back then. Doubtlessly, that was a saint child. There was a large group of people around him, all of them suffused with dense killing intent. "Zhuwak," the 9 Sparrow whispered. That was one of the descendants he admired the most. He was the one who had personally sent him onto the star passages, and his temperament was quite similar to his own back then. He was evolving into a vermilion bird, and his descendants would naturally possess the bloodline of a sacred bird. They would no longer be Een sparrows, and their race would call themselves vermilion birds. At this moment, Zhu Wuk was frustrated because he had witnessed the 9 Een sparrow being killed even in the folded space. He couldn't sit or sleep in peace now. At this moment, he sensed something. He suddenly looked up and saw 2 beams of scarlet light descending. His heart trembled as he cried out, "Old ancestor, are you all right?" His intuition was too sharp, and he guessed who it was. The 9 Een sparrow asked the quasi-sage golden wolf to help him. He used the scarlet light to form a line of small words outside the folded space and inquired about the current situation on Earth. A heaven's chosen has appeared. His name is Chu Feng. He once defeated the troops led by the descendants of my sworn brother Yuan Chenkong and killed many knights. The 9 Een sparrow was surprised to learn of this and immediately became vigilant. That was because he had heard that Chu Feng's main method of attack was domains. We must find that Chu Feng, even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground. Kill him and obtain all the secrets on him. The 9 Een sparrow issued a death order. That was because he had some thoughts. If the silver heavenly book the Sage Master had used to kill him were to be passed down on Earth, it would most likely be passed down to that Chu Feng with his astonishing talent in domains. The heaven's chosen one doesn't matter if he's a fake one or a true one. As long as he's the inheritor of domains, I'd rather kill him than let him go, the 9 Een sparrow said coldly, following which his gaze turned toward Mount Lu. He wanted to see the descendants of his sworn brother Yuan Chenkong and understand the situation further. 9th ancestor. Yuan Feng was somewhat excited after learning that the 2 beams of scarlet light descending from the sky were the 9 Een sparrow borrowing the power of others to manifest its divinity. The so-called 9th ancestor was a sworn brother of his ancestor Yuan Chenkong. He was ranked 9th among the heavenly knights back in the day. Yuan Feng truthfully informed him of the current events on Earth. The 9 Een sparrow heard Chu Feng's name again from him and gained a deeper understanding of him. He was a quasi-sage, and his intuition was terrifyingly sharp. You're saying that this Chu Feng is odd. He made you feel a dangerous aura after calming down and suspected that he would become a great calamity. The 9 Een sparrow manifested its divinity and constructed words with scarlet light. Yuan Feng reported, yes, his evolutionary level isn't high, but when I circulated the 100 transformations breathing technique that day, I vaguely felt a bit sluggish. I didn't pay much attention at the time, but now that I've calmed down, I feel as if I'm naturally restrained by his breathing technique. The more I think about it, the more terrifying and bizarre it is. There must be a great secret on him. I suspect he has grasped a breathing technique no weaker than the top 10 planets. The 9 Een sparrow was able to survive from ancient times until now and finally become a quasi-sage. Not only was he ruthless, but he also possessed true abilities. His intuition was terrifying beyond imagination. This rebel is too extraordinary. I must kill him. He immediately made this judgment. Are you done? The quasi-sage golden wolf spoke in outer space. A sense of alarm arose in his heart. Even though he didn't attack the ground, this kind of spying made him uneasy. Wait a moment. Before I disperse my Tao, I'll borrow brother's strength to capture a wisp of heaven's secrets, said the 9 Een sparrow. The quasi-sage Tao dispersion was astonishing. After losing his Tao, he would gain a split second of enlightenment before his energy completely dissipated. This would plant the seeds for his future rise. And now, he wanted to carry it out immediately. He hoped to borrow that wisp of enlightenment to pry into the truth of the heavenly secrets and see whether it was good or bad. That was because he was very concerned about this Chu Feng. Because he had killed too many people here in the past, he was extremely vigilant towards the rise of the rebels on this planet. Chi. In outer space, divine radiance blossomed. The 9 Een sparrow's final quasi-sage radiance dispersed and disappeared between heaven and earth. He trembled. That was because he felt uneasy and terrified when he thought about the rebel named Chu Feng on the ground. This wasn't a good omen because that person might be a disaster. Dao friend, I'll borrow your strength to pass on my decree. I'll definitely repay you generously in the future. The Nining Sparrow was incomparably solemn as he requested the quasi-sage Golden Wolf's assistance. In the end, indistinct characters traversed the sky and announced to all the divine sons and saintesses on the star passages that those who killed the native Chu Feng would receive a Saint Bronze Seal. This so-called Saint Bronze Seal had a material object, but the most important thing was the meaning it represented. The saint bestowing a bronze seal meant that he could take action for that person once. This was such a great fortune and opportunity. Was there anything in the starry skies that a saint couldn't handle? In an instant, all the famed mountains on earth were shaken. All the goddesses, saint children, and princes on the star passages were seething with excitement. Chapter 446. Although the words in the sky were blurry, they could still be seen clearly. They were written in the interstellar language, the common divine language used by evolved beings. The results it had caused were difficult to estimate. In the blink of an eye, all the outer realm entities on the famed mountains and star passages on Earth were momentarily speechless. Then, it was as if the starry sky had exploded. Be it the ordinary descenders, goddesses, or successors of the imperial court, all of them felt their blood rush. For a moment, they were all shaken and dumbfounded. Divine manifestation. In the outer realm, a saint had manifested the divine language and announced to the world that such a large force had been mobilized just to kill a native. This shocked everyone. Some people were completely dumbfounded. Then, there was an earth-shattering whistling sound as countless people cried out in alarm. This wasn't limited to the outer realm entities. The natives of Earth also raised their heads to look at the words. They didn't recognize them, but the descenders told them the truth. Later on, people from all over the world knew what had happened. A saint had issued a must-kill order for Chu Feng. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Mount Huang, Mount Zhongnan, Mount Lu. There were countless famed mountains and star passages in the world. There were also countless people from other galaxies. Now, their hearts were in turmoil and they couldn't calm down. The Saint Bronze Seal was an unimaginable gift. It could be used to protect one's life and could even invite a saint to kill all of one's enemies. As long as one's request wasn't too outrageous, the saint would most likely satisfy one's wish. For example, wanting to marry a direct descendant of a saint and demanding a saint's breathing technique was simply not knowing what was good for oneself. Even if one was bestowed with a bronze seal, one who dared to take advantage of a saint's kindness and deceive them would be turned to ashes. Some of the divine sons and saintesses came from families with very long histories and extremely powerful backgrounds. There might still be living saints among them, but even if they were direct descendants, they might not be able to see the supreme beings in their families. At that level, they would often be in seclusion for a mortal's lifetime, or even more than a dozen lifetimes. Not to mention the descendants of tens or hundreds of generations. Even their children and grandchildren, who were the closest to them by blood, couldn't see them often. It was even less likely for them to act to satisfy the wishes of a descendant. It was extremely rare for a saint to act. Even in the starry skies, it was rare to see a saint unless there was a major event. Of course, due to the personalities of some saints, they might especially like the descendants of certain geniuses. They might show their divinity from time to time and wouldn't be seen only once in hundreds or thousands of years. In short, it was hard to meet a sage, and it was even harder to get them to act. Therefore, now that the Saint Bronze Seal was bestowed, the various star passages immediately exploded. Chu Feng, what exactly did this native heaven's chosen one do to infuriate the saint? It actually caused the saint to show his divinity and request the various divine sons to kill him. Someone's breathing became hurried, and his eyes became bloodshot. This was a creature from outside this region behind a famous mountain. He wanted to remove that head and exchange it for the Saint Bronze Seal. On another star passage, a certain saint child was apprehensive and longed for that Saint Bronze seal. The saint of the orthodoxy he belonged to had already fallen several thousand years ago, and he urgently needed the protection of the bronze seal. Someone else said with a trembling voice, "If I can obtain the saint's bronze seal, I will ask the saint to kill all the enemies of my tribe. If I can get my hands on the saint's bronze seal, I can ask the saint to help me deduce this flawed breathing technique and continue the glory of my family." Each famed mountain had different people with different thoughts. In any case, the characters in the sky had stirred up a great storm. However, there were also some divine sons and saintesses on the star passages who were very calm and expressionless from beginning to end. Their subordinates were very anxious and worried that they would fall behind the people from the other star passages. One of them asked, "Divine Son, should we participate in the operation to kill Chu Feng? Everyone wants to take action, but there's only one Chu Feng. Can we split him evenly?" A divine son asked in reply. This was a big problem. If everyone's target was Chu Feng, it might even become a matter of the saint children fighting over the prey. Although the divine sons and saintesses would have fierce competition and might even fight to the death for the fortunes and fortunes on this planet at the critical moment, it was best to avoid it if possible. Some divine sons and saintesses were very arrogant and conceited. They believed that they would become saints one day. In their eyes, the Saint Bronze Seal was no match for the legendary divine objects on this planet. Oh, that Chu Feng is really extraordinary to make the saints angry. There were also goddesses and saint children who revealed odd expressions as they guessed what he had done. Provoking the saints into a rage was enough to explain the problem. The native heaven's chosen one was extremely extraordinary. It would be very difficult to kill him. If a few or more of the divine sons and saintesses who went to kill Chu Feng fall, then things will get interesting. Someone sneered. That was because it would definitely cause a huge storm once the imperial daughters and Tao children fell one after another. Within the folded space, the people from different galaxies had different reactions. Some were eager to fight, some were calm and indifferent, while others were sneering and waiting for the unexpected. In outer space, the quasi-sage golden wolf spat out a mouthful of blood. He had suffered a backlash, and the dozens of golden braids on his head had dimmed somewhat. Although he hadn't attacked Earth, he had still suffered a backlash after showing his divinity. The quasi-sage being injured was caused by the backlash. This was definitely a big matter. "Tao, Brother Golden Wolf, I'm sorry for implicating you this time. I'll definitely repay you generously in the future," said the nine-inch sparrow. The quasi-sage Golden Wolf said, "You can't go back on your word after showing your divinity. Once someone kills Chu Feng, will you be able to take out the Saint's Bronze Seal as a reward?" One of my sworn brothers is Yuan Chunkong, one of the heavenly knights back then. Now that he's a saint, it won't be a problem for him to take out a Saint's Bronze Seal. The quasi-sage Golden Wolf suffered a serious backlash. He coughed up another mouthful of blood and sighed. Have you ever thought about what would happen if those divine sons and saintesses who went to kill Chu Feng failed one after another and were instead killed by him? Some things didn't need to be said. If a group of divine sons and saintesses were to die, the impact would be great. It was fine if they were to fall under normal circumstances, but if a saint showed his divinity and caused them to kill the native heaven's chosen one, the problem would be grave. This was the result of the nine-inch sparrow's forceful interference. The consequences would be terrifying if they were to investigate further. If those divine sons and saintesses' families had living saints behind them, they would most likely cause trouble for the nine-inch sparrow after learning of this situation. The consequences would be unimaginable. The nine-inch sparrow's expression changed. Impossible. That rebel's level of evolution is still very low. After our interference, Earth will most likely undergo rapid changes. Those divine sons and saintesses will soon step into Earth's main space. With their high strength, killing someone at the shackled realm is a piece of cake. The quasi-sage Golden Wolf nodded. Let's hope so. In any case, it's too late to say anything now that he has shown his divinity. On Mount Longhu, Chu Feng looked up at the firmament. A long time had passed, but he was still lost in thought. A saint has appeared and summoned all the divine sons to kill me. Bastard! Finally, Chu Feng let loose a torrent of curses after coming to. A great crisis had appeared for him. How could he survive being hunted down by a group of saint children? Although he had made bold claims about hunting down goddesses and fairies, what would he do if a group of saintesses were to charge at him? He could only run. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. B** starred in outer space. Listen carefully. I will destroy your descendants who have embarked on the path of stars on earth. In the firmament, the quasi-sage golden wolf and the nine-eared sparrow were capturing the scenery of the famed mountains. Unexpectedly, they saw Chu Feng's figure on Mount Longhu and knew that he was the main character. Seeing his agitated appearance, they immediately knew that he was cursing loudly. Following which, the quasi-sage golden wolf used his divine instinct to listen and also let the nine-eared sparrow sense it. The two's expressions immediately turned gloomy. How many years had it been since they last heard curses? Ever since they became quasi-sages, they were revered as gods. Who dare be disrespectful? But now they were being cursed. The two quasi-sages' expressions sank as they stared at the native. Foolish outer realm birds, just you wait. It won't be that easy to kill me. I'll wipe out a group of divine sons and saintesses and make you regret it. Chu Feng pointed at the sky. Chu Feng cursed and vented out the resentment in his heart. He felt even more delighted. But the expressions of the two outer realm quasi-sages turned darker and darker. In the end, they disappeared with a swoosh. They couldn't bear to listen on and were worried that there would be even more excessive words. A stately quasi-sage being criticized and scolded was something they had never experienced before. This feeling was simply too odd. Yang Xian, Hu Qingsheng, and Qinglan had already returned to the vicinity of Earth. Using the Tao fruit crystals of clairvoyant and clairaudient, they saw and heard everything clearly and were all in a daze. What did they see? Chu Feng had chased away the two quasi-sages. This was truly odd. At this time, even those from the star passages in the folded space behind Mount Longhu were speechless. They had heard it with their own ears. In the end, Chu Feng also ran away. He wanted to go into hiding and avoid trouble. But after only 2 days, he couldn't sit still anymore and could no longer hide. That was because during these 2 days, the changes on Earth had accelerated and every famed mountain was glowing. Many mutant fruits on many famed mountains were evolving and their medicinal effects were increasing rapidly. I'll take advantage of this opportunity to pluck mutant fruits from all over the world. Chu Feng decided to move quickly. He wanted to traverse the famed mountains and great rivers in search of suitable fruits. Everything was for the sake of evolution. Back then, the Rubik's Cube had fallen into the ocean and caused rapid evolution in the ocean. Recently, the two quasi-sages had attacked Earth, and the effects were even greater. During these 2 days, the energy density on Earth had increased by a large margin. An era of rapid evolution was about to arrive. During these 2 days, some carefree realm, outer realm entities began to charge through the folded space in order to cross over. As expected, many mutant fruits are evolving rapidly, and their medicinal effects have increased greatly. Chu Feng was pleasantly surprised. From Mount Longhu to Mount Yindang, and then to Mount Hua, he saw many glowing mutant trees. Along the way, Chu Feng searched for powerful mutant fruits. He wanted to take advantage of the time before those Tao children and goddesses came out to improve himself and evolve rapidly. On the 5th day, Chu Feng picked some ideal fruits and began to harvest them. As time went on, some even more powerful fruits appeared in succession. Chu Feng immediately became busy. He charged into Mount Hung, climbed Mount Hua, and entered the mysterious Qinling Mountains, picking mutant fruits along the way. The era of rapid evolution had begun. Chapter 447. An entity surpassing the shackled realm had appeared at Mount Wui and forcefully charged into the main space of Earth. In the end, its arms were burned off by domain runes, and it was left howling in anguish. The commotion here wasn't small and was discovered by an Iron Snake King. News of this spread to the outside world and immediately caused people to feel extremely uneasy. The Snake King was convinced that the humanoid entity had reached the carefree realm. The scene when it breathed was astonishing. Energy undulated between its nose and mouth like two leaping white flood dragons. This was a major event and an extremely dangerous signal. Beings surpassing the shackled realm were about to walk out one after another and enter Earth. This caused the native evolvers to feel extremely uneasy. Finally, a high-level entity has appeared. Chu Feng sighed. This day had finally arrived. Only 5 days had passed since the quasi-sage took action. This powerful interference from the starry skies directly caused the Earth to undergo violent changes. The energy density between the famed mountains increased sharply. Green vines blossomed with blue radiance, and flowers gushed with radiance. Even the cliffs became sparkling and translucent. Everything was different now. The mutant fruit's medicinal effects were rapidly increasing. The person who had charged out of Mount Wui had lost both arms and couldn't be considered a threat. However, this didn't mean that the other outer realm entities would be the same. The famed mountains and great rivers were restless with the cries of apes and roars of tigers. There was no peace. The pressure on Chu Feng increased several times. What could he do? The only way was to find mutant fruits to rapidly evolve and become stronger. If he waited until all the divine sons and saintesses had charged out and his strength hadn't increased, he would be in a desperate situation. There would be the threat of death. The saint had issued a decree to kill him. The effects were too great. Chu Feng's harvest was quite bountiful. He had found several strengthening mutant fruits like the scarlet flame pear and the silver fruit. These could help him sever his 10th shackle if refined into medicine. In the past, he would be incomparably delighted, but now he felt a sense of urgency. He felt that it wasn't enough. I wonder how the golden date from Mount Huang is doing. Hopefully, it'll give me a pleasant surprise. Chu Feng muttered to himself. He didn't go pick it immediately and wanted to nurture it for a couple of days. He had been nurturing that date tree before heading to the moon, hoping to pick it in half a month's time. Now that the world was undergoing rapid changes, he was looking forward to its medicinal effects increasing rapidly. That was because that date tree had taken root on the essence flames of extreme yang. It was originally a sacred tree, but because it had just awakened, it didn't display any heaven-defying abilities. Chu Feng believed that when it bloomed and bore fruit next year, the old jujube tree would most likely be extraordinary. At this time, some corporations such as Bodhi Biogenetics, the Extraterrestrial Research Institute, and the Archaic Alliance contacted Chu Feng. The descenders from the outer realms were getting stronger and stronger. These corporations were feeling uneasy and wanted to discuss countermeasures. Chu Feng declined and did not show up. He didn't have time to discuss these things right now. He just wanted to become stronger. Chu Feng arrived at Mount Jijin as fast as lightning and began to deploy domains to conceal this special area. That was because he wanted to refine medicine and didn't want to be discovered. Since he had a suitable mutant fruit in his hands, he wouldn't waste any time. He wanted to improve himself first, because he was afraid that something unexpected would happen. If he didn't make it in time to refine the medicine, then he would only regret it. In this mountainous region, the light of the fire raged, but no one in the outside world could sense it. Chu Feng laid down several layers of domains here and enveloped the revered 8 trigrams furnace, isolating it from the outside world. Apart from Chu Feng's medicine refinement, there were also various secret treasures within the 8 trigrams furnace, such as the spirit binding cord, the bronze sword, the silver armor, and the Buddhist race's monastic robe. Of course, there was also the diamond chakram and the spatial bottle. Raging flames surged and flickered, illuminating Chu Feng's body with a lustrous golden glow. He was suffused with a treasured splendor that was both tenacious and powerful. Beside him, several mutant fruits were being refined together. They gradually condensed into a sparkling liquid and began to transform into a pill. It was quite a rare sight. At the same time, the weapons were glowing as they were being nurtured and refined within the furnace. They were suffused with a spiritual radiance. Chu Feng was astonished. During this process, he discovered that the diamond chakram was undergoing some changes. Every time he came here to refine it, some complex and profound patterns would appear on it. Of course, these patterns weren't just on the surface. In the end, they had to be retracted inside. As for the outside of the bracelet, it became increasingly white and translucent. However, the greatest change was the monastic robe. It was as red as the sunset and flickered with radiance. In the end, it was actually covered in clouds and rosy clouds. The Buddhist race's monastic robe became increasingly red after the refinement. The golden lines on it were swimming about like little snakes, coming to life and constructing complex patterns. Chu Feng was astonished. The value of this monastic robe was even greater than he had imagined. There was a certain domain within it that was being perfected. Could it be the legendary, the quality of all living beings? He revealed an astonished expression. He had flipped through a large number of ancient books on the moon and had read about the Buddhist race's unique domains in a certain handwritten book. Among them, the equality of all living beings had been evaluated as a great grandmaster's masterpiece. It wasn't that this type of domain was powerful, but rather that it was ingenious and ingenious. Within this domain, one was equal regardless of whether one was a golden arhat or a lesser demon. Chu Feng's heart was thumping wildly. One had to know that the Buddhist race's unique domain, the equality of all living beings, was only mentioned in the ancient books on the moon. I hope it could be restored. Chu Feng's eyes were brilliant and filled with incomparable desire. He knew there was something wrong with this monastic robe and that he would have to refine it slowly. It was hard to say what would happen in the end. After a day and a night, the flames in all directions were extinguished and the area around Mount Jijin became quiet. There were a dozen or so sparkling pills within the revered 8 trigrams furnace. Each and every one of them was brilliant and faintly purple. Chu Feng didn't say anything and immediately swallowed one of them. In an instant, his entire body surged with divine light and rushed out from his pores. The activity of the cells in his body increased rapidly. Bang! It was as if something within his body had been torn apart. His spleen began to glow brilliantly as a layer of radiance seeped out and covered the surface of his body. His constitution was rapidly improving, and his cell activity was increasing rapidly. Some substances were excreted from his pores along with his sweat and fell to the ground with a slight tremble. Everything came to an end only after a long while. Chu Feng's body was sparkling and translucent. His 5 viscera were all connected, and the energy density had increased by a large margin. This was especially true after he had broken the spleen shackle. He had obtained a completely new ability. The surface of his body would be suffused with a layer of radiance as soon as he exerted a bit of force. It was like a protective armor and was difficult to break through. This greatly increased his defensive power. The spleen was the human body's largest immune system. Now that it had released its energy, it was indeed related to this. It was used for defense. This was very practical and could protect oneself in battle. However, Chu Feng frowned. He had obtained many abilities during the Shackle realm, but lacked a systematic sorting. He would need to plan them carefully after reaching the Carefree realm. He picked up the monastic robe and observed it in detail. A satisfied smile appeared on his face. This item was indeed mysterious. Swoosh! Chu Feng packed up his things and left immediately. He then once again charged into the famed mountains. He had decided to rise to prominence and evolve continuously in a short period of time. Actually, the greatest fortune is on Mount Tai's pilgrimage altar. There are peaches of immortality and herbs there. Unfortunately, I don't have the confidence to go up there at the moment. The domains there are too vast. Chu Feng frowned. His current attainments in domains were quite extraordinary, but it was still somewhat difficult for him to break the altar at the pilgrimage grounds. He decided to roam around the famed mountains and take action there in order to deepen his understanding of domains. On Mount Luofu, a green vine was blossoming with green radiance. There were 6 purple golden fruits on it. They were flat and round in shape and suffused with fragrance. Chu Feng was delighted. He was sure that these fruits would be effective for him. They could be used to refine medicine and help him evolve. As expected of Mount Luofu, there are many legends of immortals in ancient times. There are mutant fruits here that can help me sever my 11th shackle. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain at the back of his head. It was as if a sharp sword was about to pierce through his skull. Chu Feng quickly lowered his head. With a bang, a short spear as thick as an arm flew past his body and struck a small mountain in the distance, causing it to explode. A single spear had destroyed a mountain peak. Swoosh! Chu Feng picked all the purple golden fruits with a raise of his hand. He then leapt up and appeared 4 or 5 kilometers away. Chi, chi, chi. During this process, several short spears flew over at great speed and chased after him. Were it not for the fact that Chu Feng had a pair of luminous wings that could rapidly change directions in midair, he would have been pierced through. Only after Chu Feng had left the most effective range of the spears did he land on the ground. He turned back to look 8 kilometers away and saw a tall entity approaching with murderous intent. He had already locked on a Chu Feng, a carefree realm entity. This person had 4 arms, and his skin was bronze in color. He was strong and powerful, and apart from his arms, he was no different from any other human. Apparently, he knew of Chu Feng and had seen the information in photos. The temptation of the Saint Bronze Seal was irresistible to him. He longed to cut off Chu Feng's head. "You dare kill me alone on a famed mountain?" Chu Feng's expression was cold. The 4-armed humanoid entity didn't say anything. The failure of his sneak attack just now had made him realize that things were going to be bad. Boom! The next moment, he moved with exceptional speed and chased after Chu Feng on Mount Luofu. His hands glowed continuously as he hurled out one spear after another. Those weren't physical objects, but energy. He wanted to suppress Chu Feng and make him unable to pay attention to anything else. He wanted to passively receive his storm-like attacks. Boom! Unfortunately, this wasn't a plain or a city, but a famed mountain. With a single thought from Chu Feng, the domains that originally existed underground were activated. The area was immediately filled with sonorous sounds and surging killing intent. Chu Feng used the domains to fight with him. In the end, a spider's silk-like beam of light interweaved together and formed an inescapable net that covered that person. Chu Feng seized the opportunity and immediately rushed over. He brandished the bronze sword and chopped off the enemy's head with a single strike. A stream of blood rushed out of the headless corpse. Afterwards, he left into the distance. If they were to fight on a famed mountain, he would hold a great advantage and would be undefeated on his home ground. Chu Feng left, leaving behind a strong corpse. He returned to Mount Jijin in Jiangning and once again began to refine medicine. One day later, he severed his 11th shackle. His liver glowed and surged with purple light, increasing his strength once again. This time, the secret treasures around him had a limited upgrade. At this time, the outside world wasn't calm. Carefree realm entities had really come out, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 of them. Where's Chu Feng? Some people wanted to find Chu Feng and obtain the Saint Bronze Seal by killing him. This wasn't just 1 or 2 people, but a large group of entities. All of them had walked out from the famed mountains. A few more days have passed. The sunflame dates on Mount Huang should be almost ripe by now. Chu Feng sped along the way and was finally about to pick the mutant fruits there. He rushed to Mount Huang and climbed the peak. As expected, the golden fruits on the tree were like small lanterns. Moreover, their fragrance assailed his nostrils and gave him a pleasant surprise. After the rapid upheaval, the old date tree on Mount Huang had grown vigorously. It contained both a medicinal and fruity fragrance, and those fist-sized dates were surging with golden light. There was originally a domain here, and now it had been set up by Chu Feng. Ordinary people couldn't reach it, and thus no one had been able to pick it. The old date tree had taken root in the flame essence and was suffused with auspicious energy. Its green leaves were sparkling, and now all the fruits had ripened completely. The medicinal effects were extremely powerful and could allow Chu Feng to evolve. He revealed a smile and plucked all of them with a wave of his hand. Then, without stopping, he once again rushed to Mount Jijin to refine medicine. On this day, he isolated himself from the world and didn't pay attention to the outside world. He was focused on improving himself and paid no attention to the various changes in the outside world. In truth, there was a great commotion in the outside world. Many powerful characters had appeared, and carefree realm entities had begun to roam the world. After one day and one night, Chu Feng succeeded in refining medicine. After swallowing a golden pill in the revered 8 trigrams furnace, the energy in his body surged and surged wildly. A mass of dazzling light erupted from his abdomen, causing his entire body to tremble. He was astonished to find that there was something different after the opening of the shackle in his abdomen. It was comparable to the disturbance when he had severed the shackle in his heart. His abdomen was quite spacious and had obtained a special ability to devour external energy, store it, and then transfer it to his limbs and bones. At this point, Chu Feng had already severed his 12th shackle and reached the peak of this realm. Normally, it was enough to sever the 12th shackle. Any further, and his combat strength wouldn't increase, and he could already enter the carefree realm. Chu Feng suddenly opened his eyes. A golden vortex had formed in his abdomen, devouring the heaven and earth and absorbing all rivers into the sea. Energy surged violently, and his combat strength soared. This was especially true because the black and white grinding stone in his body was also in this position. It could purify energy and increase the quality by several levels. Chu Feng's abdomen glowed and then spread to his whole body. Comparatively speaking, Chu Feng was much stronger than ordinary people at the shackle realm. Even though he had to fumble around on this declining planet, he was still able to reach this level. In the outside world, he could also be called a divine son or a saint child. I wonder what's going on outside. Chu Feng walked out of Mount Jijin. He left the special terrain, the revered 8 trigrams furnace, and fished out his communicator from the spatial bottle. After reading the message in detail, his expression immediately changed. Someone had gone to Qingyang town at the foot of Mount Taihang to inquire about his whereabouts. In the end, his family's residence there was burned to ashes. Was this a declaration of war? Very soon, he learned that someone was searching for a group of great demons from Mount Kunlun. They wanted to make a move on them and find out where he was. However, the Mastiff King and the old Lama had long since left Mount Kunlun and no longer occupied that place. Following which, Chu Feng's expression changed once again. He had received news that there were descenders looking for his parents. This was to force him to appear. He wasn't worried because he had long since told his parents to hide together with the Elder Ape. For the St. Bronze Seal, these people are willing to do anything. They only want to force me out and cut off my head. Chu Feng's eyes were cold. So what if you're at the carefree realm? Today, I'll fight you all. Saint children, goddesses, whoever is targeting me can come at me. Otherwise, just wait for me to start a massacre. Chu Feng was fearless. If he were to lose, he would just charge into the famed mountains. Chapter 448. Gentle music was playing in the dining room as Chu Feng immersed himself in the food. Recently, he had been searching for mutant fruits in the deep mountains and great swamps. Sometimes he would think about it and realize that this kind of life was completely out of touch with the city. Was he still a modern person? During this period, he contacted the old Lama, the Mastiff King, and the Wudong Grandmaster. He felt relieved after confirming that they were all safe and sound. Afterwards, he left Jiangning and once again arrived at the mountain forest outside the city. Every city, no matter which one it was now surrounded by primeval forests. The world had changed too much in a year, and people had gradually adapted to it. Brother-in-law, you must be careful. Carefree realm experts are looking for you. They come with ill intentions and surging with killing intent. Xiong Kuan and Hu Sheng, who hadn't seen each other for a long time, reported to Chu Feng. Du Huijin, Ouyang Qing, and the others were also contacting Chu Feng to inform him of the situation. Boss, hide quickly. Carefree realm monsters are too terrifying. They're actually looking for us and want to follow the clues to find you. Fortunately, we're smart and have long since hidden ourselves. After returning to the city for a short while, many acquaintances contacted Chu Feng to let him know about the recent situation. Carefree realm evolvers had officially appeared, and their numbers weren't small either. Chu Feng walked through the mountainous region outside the city while carving on some magnetic stones. He was quite serious and didn't use his spiritual power to leave a mark on them. Instead, he was carving with a flying sword in hand. He was making arrangements and making some preparations. Many people were looking for him. Needless to say, they wanted to chop off his head. The saints had issued a decree to kill him. The entities who had walked out from the star passages behind the famed mountains responded in succession. Now, they were all rubbing their palms in eagerness to exchange his head for the saint's bronze seal. It's not certain who will kill who. Once I kill all the divine sons and saintesses, will those old fellows from the outer realms become jealous and show their divinity at all costs? Chu Feng muttered to himself with a cold smile. He had completely calmed down. He wanted to lay down an offensive domain. If anyone really dared to come, he would kill them all. He estimated that those people might not dare approach if he were to use the famed mountains as the battlefield. But if he were to fight on an ordinary mountain, he would have to make meticulous preparations and arrangements. I'm just afraid that these people won't take it. Chu Feng really wanted to settle things once and for all. He laid down a terrifying domain and caught them all in one fell swoop. Ever since he walked out of Jiangning City, he had been thinking of a place to kill the divine sons, hunt the saintesses, and have a glorious battle. As he carved on the magnet, he pondered. Actually, Jiangning was a good choice. It was suitable for casting a wide net, but just as he was worried, those people might not take the bait. However, things often developed beyond one's expectations. The next day, a piece of news spread. The Putuo Grand Meeting was about to begin. The location was Mount Putuo, and the participants were well-known evolvers from Earth as well as beings from various star passages in the famed mountains of the world. When Chu Feng received the news, he felt that it was absurd. The Putuo Assembly actually wanted to discuss how to avoid bloodshed as much as possible. The native evolvers should live in harmony with the outer realm beings. Talk about stopping war and peaceful coexistence. When Chu Feng heard this, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. It was because Putuo Distinguished Meeting had also invited him. With him present, how could there be harmony? Peace? No bloodshed? If he were present, some people's heads would probably be beaten into dog heads, and their blood would splatter over Mount Putuo. With him present, how could the Putuo Grand Meeting be peaceful? Who would believe such a thing? He felt that it was too laughable. Chu Feng sneered and paid no attention. The old man Lu Tong contacted him immediately and informed him of the situation. It was said that some of the divine sons and saintesses from the star passages enjoyed great prestige. They were the ones who had issued the order to stop fighting. Although he had left the Hollow Jade Temple, the old man was still well informed. The saint had issued an edict to kill Chu Feng, but in the end, some people didn't obey. In any case, Chu Feng wasn't willing to pay attention to them. He didn't want to go to Mount Putuo. However, some carefree realm beings wanted to talk to him by name. They invited him over and had the corporations bring their words. Chu Feng pondered for a while and finally revealed a cold smile. Why wouldn't he dare go? That place was Mount Putuo, the famous Buddha mountain, and it was extremely suitable for laying down domains. In the end, Chu Feng went there. He wanted to see how powerful these carefree realm beings were and what they were like. Mount Putuo, also known as the Buddhist Kingdom of the Southern Sea and the Southern Sea, was one of the 4 famed mountains of Buddhism. It was located in the eastern sea region of the Joshan archipelago. Bodhi Biogenetics' main camp was here and occupied this famed mountain. However, they had been keeping a low profile recently and were rumored to have given up on it. Chu Feng walked very slowly. He carved on the magnetic stones along the way and spent over a day before arriving. This was simply too slow for his speed. After the upheaval, this island was many times larger than before. He walked onto the beach. The island was enshrouded in spiritual energy, and white mist curled up in spirals. The purple bamboo forest stretched as far as the eye could see. The gathering this time wasn't on Mount Putua's peak, but at the foot of the mountain. Chu Feng suspected that some people were afraid of him using this famed mountain to attack. The lustrous purple bamboo forest rustled in the wind like purple agate carvings. All the bamboos were glowing faintly, and the scenery was fairly beautiful. Many people had arrived. At the very least, Chu Feng saw many familiar faces, such as Chi Honglin from the Preaching Research Institute, and some old fellows from Bodhi Biogenetics. Chu Feng really came? Someone cried out in surprise along the way. He couldn't believe it. Indeed, the saints had issued a decree to kill him. How could he dare show himself under such circumstances? One had to know that some carefree realm beings from the outer realms had come here today. Chu Feng passed through the purple bamboo forest. The area before him was covered in a carpet of green grass. The terrain was flat and spacious, accompanied by a small clear lake and a row of fine houses. There were many people attending the gathering. The attendants shuttled back and forth among the crowd, delivering fine wine. There were beasts and humans here. They were chatting in groups of 2 or 3 and clinking glasses from time to time. It seemed quite harmonious. At the very least, everything was peaceful and no one was making a ruckus. It was just that the people attending the banquet were all dressed differently. For instance, some were wearing formal attire, while others were wearing ancient clothing and holding wine glasses. The scene was quite odd. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression. He found it odd. For instance, he saw a young man in ancient attire with a wooden hairpin in his hair. He was holding a glass of red wine and was happily conversing with Jiang Luoshan in an evening gown. This scene was truly indescribably odd. Chu Feng passed through the purple bamboo forest and officially set foot here. He immediately caused a commotion and attracted the gazes of many people. "Brother Chu, you're quite courageous to actually come here," a white-robed man with an outstanding temperament spoke. It was Su Qing, the youngest Xingyi Fist Grandmaster. Chu Feng revealed a smile after seeing him. He naturally wouldn't forget how he had attacked this scholarly Grandmaster from behind, knocked him out, and taken away the Xingyi Fist Manual. The matter was already in the past. He would never admit it, even if he was beaten to death. "Chu Feng, over here," Jiang Luoshan called out to him. She was still as beautiful as ever. Her hair draped over her shoulders, her eyes were like black gems, and her eyelashes were very long. Her red lips were sexy, and her white dress accentuated her figure. Chu Feng walked over. He had long since noticed the young man beside her, in ancient attire, and holding a glass of red wine. "This is Saint Li Qing from the Feiyu planet." Jiang Luoshan introduced herself. Even she found it odd that a saint child from the outer realms was standing between her and Chu Feng, 2 modern people. A saint's son had already appeared. Chu Feng narrowed his eyes. He greeted him while sizing him up carefully. Logically speaking, a saint's son of this level should have immediately attacked him and cut off his head to exchange for the Saint Bronze Seal. However, Li Qing was very calm and had no intention of attacking. He said, "Brother Chu, you really came. You're quite courageous." Then, he said with a smile, "Aren't you afraid that I'll suddenly attack? It's not good at such a close distance." Chu Feng was very calm. He was wearing the equality of all beings monastic robe, so he wasn't worried at all. He definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. "I trust Saint Sun Li's character," he said. "I don't care if you believe me or not. Some of us have no enmity against Chu Feng. We just want to get to know him. It's best if we can become friends," Li Qing said. After a few simple words, Li Qing apologized and went to meet the other people who had just arrived. They were all dressed in ancient attire, and it was obvious that they were of high status. "You're too risky. Why did you really come?" Jiang Luoshan asked Chu Feng in a low voice. "Isn't Mount Putuo the headquarters of Bodhi Biogenetics? You'll have to protect me when the time comes," Chu Feng said with a smile. Jiang Luoshan rolled her eyes. "How can you still smile at a time like this?" She then sighed. "We've already decided to abandon Mount Putuo. We can't afford it." Chu Feng nodded. Bodhi Biogenetics indeed couldn't defend this place. Qian Jia and Qian Yi, the two disciples of Buddha, were far inferior to the extraterrestrials. Not to mention those two, even Chu Feng himself was doing his best to catch up to the next level of evolution. At this time, many people had arrived. Chu Feng saw many people from the outer realms, and all of them were experts of the carefree realm. This caused his heart to sink. There were so many experts who had passed through the folded space. On the surface of the sea, a white elephant came treading on the waves, carrying a monk onto the island. Before long, a silver silhouette flickered in the sky as a colossus descended. It was a silver dragon from the Western world. It landed on the island and transformed into a human form. The atmosphere here was lively. There were more and more experts here. Chu Feng discovered that many people from the outer realms were secretly sizing him up. Some of them had blazing gazes as if they were staring at prey, while others were calm and expressionless. But in any case, no one made a move. They were all well restrained. It seemed that this group of carefree realm beings had reached a consensus today and didn't intend to make things difficult for him. This caused Chu Feng to be astonished. What was the reason? Of course, his intuition told him that if one of them were to make a move, many others might not be able to restrain themselves and would follow suit to snatch his head. After separating from Jiang Luoshan, Chu Feng wandered around leisurely with a glass of red wine in hand. He was observing these people leisurely. The native evolvers revealed odd expressions after seeing that he dared to rush over in person. They were fairly astonished. The experts from the outer realms observed each other and spoke occasionally. During this process, Chu Feng saw many familiar faces. For example, the young master of the Baji school, Wang Yuan. He had come into contact with this person when he was setting up the weapon nurturing domain at Lake Xuanwu in Jiangning. Afterwards, he saw Princess Lin with other people from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave beside her. The two parties met in an awkward manner. In truth, it was Qi Lin who didn't know how to face Chu Feng. Last time on Mount Lu, she hadn't warned him in advance and had personally witnessed the battle between Chu Feng and the Saint Child Yuan Feng. At that time, she had thought that Chu Feng and the Saint Child weren't on the same level. But the result had astonished her. "We meet again." Chu Feng didn't mind and greeted them with a smile. "How courageous!" An old man from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave said in a low voice while gazing at Chu Feng's back. Chu Feng had dared to come to such a place despite the saint's order to kill him. As they saw it, he was too audacious. Chu Feng circled around the place and found no signs of reproach from the outer realm. However, he soon frowned after seeing the people from the Penglai Immortal Island. The one-armed Chun Sheng swept a cold glance at him from afar, his hatred undisguised. Last time, this young master of the Penglai Chun family had wanted to go to Mount Lu to surround Chu Feng. In the end, he had learned of the latter's accomplishments on the mountain and fled miserably. One of his arms had even been blown off by Chu Feng. It was quite humiliating at that time. Now, when he saw Chu Feng, his eyes were spitting fire and he wanted nothing more than to kill him. However, in the end, he hatefully turned around and no longer looked at Chu Feng. Instead, he chased after Jiang Luoshan and started chatting with her. However, Chu Feng's expression turned ugly when he used his divine instinct to listen. Moreover, he could clearly see that Jiang Luoshan was ashamed and resentful. She was unwilling to pay attention to him. "Miss Jiang, I'm serious. I don't mind what happened between you and that Chu fella. I can take you to the Penglai Immortal Island. Come with me later." Chun Sheng smiled as he spoke. He even shot a few glances at Chu Feng. He was definitely targeting him. In the past, there had been many scandals between Chu Feng and Jiang Luoshan. A little investigation would reveal that he was talking to Jiang Luoshan in such a domineering manner. He was definitely targeting Chu Feng. "I'm sorry, please step aside." Jiang Luoshan turned around and walked away. However, Chun Sheng extended his arm and blocked her way with a smile. He said, "Don't worry, I really don't care about that. Moreover, even if you still have some relationship with him, it doesn't matter. Just let him go. He's not worthy of Miss Jiang." As he spoke, he glanced at Chu Feng and revealed a faint smile. Chu Feng's eyes were cold. This person was too obvious. He was targeting him on purpose. Regardless of whether or not Jiang Luoshan had anything going on with him, Chen Sheng's actions were a form of humiliation. It was ostentatious and domineering. Chu Feng directly walked over and said, "You've lost an arm. Does it still hurt?" Chen Sheng's eyes were spitting fire. He wanted nothing more than a pounce on Chu Feng. In the end, he coldly snorted and said, "Chu Feng, you're too insolent. What relationship does this woman have with you? Nothing at all. A fair and graceful lady is a gentleman's pursuit. I'm just wooing her. What does it have to do with you?" Chu Feng really wanted to slap him to death. Even if there was nothing going on between him and Jiang Luoshan, Chun Sheng's attitude was still deliberately humiliating him. "Do you want to die?" Chu Feng's killing intent overflowed. "Young man, aren't you being too arrogant?" At this moment, an old man spoke. He took a few steps forward and swept his cold gaze over Chu Feng. Chu Feng had long since seen that Chun Sheng was deliberately provoking him. He wanted to find an excuse for this old man to attack and kill him here. He suddenly felt that it was a bit ridiculous. Today, a group of outsiders did not attack him. Instead, it was the natives who wanted to use this opportunity to kill him. "Chu Feng, let's go." Jiang Luoshan turned around and grabbed Chu Feng's hand. She directly left. She could see the danger and did not want Chu Feng to be entangled with them any longer. "Where are you going?" the old man said indifferently. He was dressed in ancient clothing and had a conceited look on his face. "You're meddling too much," Chu Feng said calmly. "Oh, I remember now. You're that Chu Feng, right? You killed a quasi-divine beast descendant of my Peng Lai immortal island. How will you compensate us?" the old man said. Chu Feng did not pay attention to him and turned to leave with Jiang Luoshan. As for that unicorn, it was Huang Tong and the others who had killed it. How could Peng Lai have the nerve to accuse him like this? Didn't they just want to attack him? "Stop." The old man smiled faintly and blocked their way. "Don't flaunt your seniority. You have no self-respect," Chu Feng said coldly. "Ah, the rumors outside say that you're the heaven's chosen one. Don't take it seriously. Have you asked my Peng Lai?" The old man looked down on him. At the same time, he released a terrifying aura unique to the carefree realm to suppress Chu Feng. Moreover, an iron chain appeared in his hand. "You killed a quasi-divine beast descendant of my Peng Lai. You must compensate us. If you really can't afford it, you'll have to leave with us first." Having said this, he was about to wrap the iron chain around Chu Feng's neck. Chu Feng's expression immediately sank. His eyes were cold to the extreme. This was going too far. That iron chain was clearly used to imprison livestock, yet the old man actually dared to do this to him and lock him up. On the side, Chun Sheng wore a smile, unable to conceal his excitement. "Let's go," the old man said indifferently. Moreover, he raised his hand and was about to use the iron chain to lock up Chu Feng. "Flaunting your seniority. You're courting death." At this moment, Chu Feng did not hesitate in the slightest. The snow-white bracelet on his wrist directly smashed over. The commotion here had already attracted some gazes. Many people were paying attention. At this moment, there was a boom as blazing flames soared. No one had expected that Chu Feng would be so decisive and direct. He had neatly dealt a fatal blow. The diamond chakram contained the essence of extreme yang. At such a close distance, the torrential flames immediately drowned the old man. Even though he was a great expert and was at the carefree realm, it was still not enough. "Oh!" The old man let out a mournful scream. He turned into a human-shaped torch and struggled fiercely. It was too sudden. No one had expected Chu Feng to be so decisive. Bang! You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.